My wife's toxic family cyberbullied me for years without me knowing exactly who was doing it. But now it's coming out that my wife not only knew about this, but she also chose to keep this information away from me, despite the fact that I was going through one of the worst mental health crises I've ever gone through in my life. And now I'm honestly feeling so betrayed that I just don't know what to do. Here's what's going on. Okay, so my marriage is in a really bad spot after a deep breach of trust. And honestly, I just don't know how to fix things. For some context, we've been together for 7 years and married for 5. And between us, we have a 2-year-old son. We met at a convention and I thought her cosplay was amazing. I struck up a conversation and the rest is history. She is the most loving, unselfish, and decent person I've ever met. Now, our relationship was never without its challenges, and our biggest obstacle was her family. My presence was unwelcome. They are very close-knit, and if one doesn't accept you, then you're just not going to get far. There are a few family members who broke away from the pack, but no one hardly acknowledges them. They are no contact and the black sheep of the family. I didn't know how my wife's family was, but I did know family was extremely important to her. Her whole upbringing was based on family, so I tried everything in my power to make it work, but they didn't really put up with me until our son came along. Between our wedding planning to shortly before the wedding, I was the target of some relentless and vicious cyberbullying. It got personal. Fake bad reviews polluted my business profile as well, and it cost me some potential clients. I didn't know where it came from or why. I couldn't find a solution. I would report and it would take a while for anything to be done, or there would be more accounts coming out for another round. The whole thing impacted my life and my mental health, and it honestly just took a toll. Now, my wife was incredibly supportive. She was my rock and my best friend. I loved her even more for her care and how she held me down. But then the trolling and everything just completely stopped. Now, I wanted nothing more than to move on. I put it all behind me until the other day when my wife confessed that her family was behind all of this. Now, I didn't believe her at first, but she was serious and showed me proof in their family group chat. And it seriously felt like I was right back there again. They were gloating and justifying themselves, saying stuff like, some people gotta learn the hard way. And they would say, if he wants to join the fold, here's his initiation. I knew I wasn't their favorite person, but I never realized they hated me and would go to such extremes. I then asked my wife when she found out about this and if she was a part of it. And she swore that she wasn't and that she would never do anything like that to me. She claimed she didn't initially know it was her family until a few months before our wedding. Apparently, one of my sister-in-laws left a profile up on her phone and my wife saw it. She then confronted her family and made them stop. Now, I asked her why she was telling me everything now, and she said it was weighing on her, and she had opened up to her eldest sister, one of the family's black sheep, and she threatened to tell me the truth if my wife didn't. But nothing my wife said made it better. She knew for years what her family did and still hid it from me. She kept everything quiet, and it honestly hurts more coming from her because she knew firsthand of my pain. Well, after all that, I was pretty numb. My wife was anxious and kept pushing for me to say something, but I told her that there wasn't anything that she could say right now that would make it okay. What she did was no better than her family. They made my life a living nightmare, and her first instinct was to cover for them. She then started crying and begged me to understand. She said it wasn't like that and that she was trying to make things right with as little damage as possible and mend relationships. But I wasn't very receptive to her. She just wasn't reaching me. I couldn't help her or myself. I told her I needed some time to clear my head, but she was against it. She said we could work through this together, but I was firm on space. But space isn't a request that she respected. I'm trying really hard to understand her side, and I'm trying to move past it, but I feel so betrayed. I trusted her more than anyone. I mean, I'm my most vulnerable with her. I kept opening up to her about the incident even after she knew the truth. She encouraged me to let it go and not allow it to have any claim on me. And I thought she had my best interests in mind, but now I just see it as her attempt to protect her family yet again. I haven't confronted anyone involved, and honestly, I don't think that they're worth it. But I've made it clear that they're no longer allowed to see our son until further notice. And now I'm getting text messages about how I'm depriving my child of grandparents and aunts over past family spats. One of the hardest parts is the distance from my wife. She's my best friend and partner in every single way. And now we're mostly only communicating about our son and other household necessities. She's hurt by my rejection and she's been crying often. And I don't know if I'm being unfair to her. I hate all of this. I want to make our marriage work, but I'm questioning our relationship up until now. I'm just feeling really lost and I honestly don't know what to do. Dude, if this happened to me, I would be so betrayed it is not even funny. Like seriously, if you want to get under my skin and make me never trust you ever again, just do something like this. Like this is a one-way ticket to me being like, oh yeah, I want nothing to do with you. Obviously, there's a lot of nuance here because this is your wife we're talking about, and you guys have a kid between the two of you, so it's not as easy as like cutting her off or anything like that. So I can't say much on the end of like what you should or shouldn't do with your marriage, but I can say this. If someone actively knew I was being cyberbullied and they knew who was doing it and and they still didn't tell me, but instead decided to cover it up by being like, hey guys, stop that, and then only tell me about it years after the fact, all because their sister basically made them do it. Like, if that happened to me, I would be so offended, it's not even funny. My trust in that person would go out the window, and I would just not believe anything that they're saying. So I guess all of that's to say that you definitely have your work cut out for you if you want this to work, because what your wife did to you, as well as what her family did to you, in my opinion, is unacceptable and not something that can ever be excused. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Am I the jerk for going back on my promise to help out my sister pay for her wedding when she picked a day that honestly really broke my heart? Because right now I'm being called a jerk and I just don't know what to do. Here's how it went down. I'm a 28-year-old male and I have an older sister who we will call Tina for the sake of the story. When I was 15, I met a girl in the same grade who we will call May, and May and I clicked instantly, and we started dating a few weeks afterwards. May and I dated through the rest of high school and college, and I asked her to marry me when we were 22 years old. We got married at 23 and had our son at 24. Now, May unexpectedly passed away in a car accident when our son was 2 years old, so about 2 years ago. I'm still devastated, and genuinely, I just don't think I'll ever date or get married again. And my whole family really liked May, and we all took her loss incredibly hard. That is, except for Tina. Tina didn't have a lot of luck with boyfriends during high school or college. Until she met someone we will call Daniel, she had never even been on a date. I know she felt really jealous that I got married and started a life first, but other than that, we were warm with each other. She was polite and respectful at May's funeral, and I thought she had gotten past the whole jealousy thing, but apparently not. Tina and Daniel started dating about 6 months after May had passed away, and I was really happy for her. They got engaged 4 months ago, and they're now planning their wedding for the summer of 2026. When they first got engaged, Tina asked me if I would be willing to help cover some of the cost, and despite raising my son alone, I work a good job and make a lot more than Tina or Daniel, and I really wanted my sister to be happy, so I just said yes. Well, they just revealed their wedding date, and yes, you guessed it. Tina and Daniel are planning to get married on the same day that May and I were married. She gave me a heads up by texting me last week and letting me know. Now, when I saw this, I asked her if she was mental, and also, why would she do this? She just said it was the date that they liked and that they had every right to pick it. Her and I went back and forth for a few days, where I kind of begged her to reconsider, but she just wouldn't do it. In fact, she posted it on Facebook yesterday. I then sent her a text basically saying that yeah, she was in the right to pick the date, but I said that I would not be in attendance or contribute financially. And when I said this, she freaked out, repeatedly calling and texting me. She called our mother, who started to call and text me, and word spreads fast in the family, so now everybody knows. And it seems like the family is split in 3 ways. Half the family says that I'm in the right, and Tina says that I'm being a jerk, both for not coming and for not paying. And there are actually some cousins supporting her. My mom says that I don't have to go, but I should keep good on my promise. Honestly, I don't know. I feel like I'm in the right, but I seriously need some objective opinions because right now I don't know what to do. Oh man, your sister is absolutely doing that on purpose. I seriously just want to say that first and foremost because this is some crazy behavior. Your sister knows this is your wedding anniversary for your dead wife, and she's doing this to get back at you for something that you didn't even do. Like, this really is some kind of like weird one-sided jealousy that just doesn't make any sense, and it honestly is just cruel and unusual. So yeah, if she wants to have this wedding on this day and be like, oh, we just picked it because we liked it, while ignoring the fact that this is the day you and your wife got married, you know, the wife that died in an accident, then go for it, but that doesn't mean you have to support her in any way, shape, or form. So no, you're not the jerk here because what she's doing seems really targeted, and I don't blame you for being pissed off. Did I overreact by snapping at an old man after he got pushy trying to get in a pool around my 2-year-old child? Because right now I'm kind of regretting the way I handled this, and I don't know if I did anything wrong. Here's how it happened. Okay, so we were at my 2-year-old child's survival swim lessons. Now, the lesson is tough for them because they're learning to swim and float on their own. There is a lot of crying involved, and at the end, we come to the edge of the pool to check in with the instructor, and the kids lay on the towel at the pool's edge to kind of decompress and to spit up any water that they may have swallowed. The area of the pool where the lessons are being held is marked off with lane lines, and it's just meant for these one-on-one swim lessons. As today's lesson ends, the instructor has my partner and myself meet our child at the edge of the pool by the ladder. As we're setting up the towel and going to get our child out of the pool, an old man in his 70s starts kind of jostling past us saying, "Excuse me," and trying to get to the ladder our child is currently climbing up. He's sort of aggressively pushing past us and cutting us off as we are literally trying to get our child. Again, the kids are upset and crying after these lessons a lot of the time, and our child is getting out pretty slowly. The old man keeps aggressively saying "excuse me" and starts trying to push past our 2-year-old to get to the ladder. Now at this point, I have my hand on my child's shoulder to help usher them out of the pool and onto the towel. And we're at the edge of the pool and my child is at the top of the ladder. Well, this old man grabs my hand off my child and pushes it, which nudges my child, by the way, and again says, "Excuse me." And at this point, I look up at him and I say, "Oh, you can wait a second or I can push you in." The old man then says, Whoa, I asked politely." But I said to him, "You grab my hand off my child. Don't ever do that again." At this point, my wife ushers me away, and I know I could have definitely handled this way better, but I am still fuming about this. So did I overreact? I mean, was my response justified? Because right now, I don't know if I'm in the wrong. Oh man, this is not one of those situations where you did anything wrong. That old guy was being pushy around a child. Like, dude, there is no excuse for that. So no, you definitely did not overreact. Today, I messed up by oversharing at a work event, resulting in Human Resources saying that I need to be more professional at work parties. And now I'm honestly so embarrassed that I seriously just don't know what to do. Here's how it went down. Okay, so I started this job about 2 months ago, so I am very new. The office is very small, consists of about 10 people, and they have an annual party. I am currently going through a very rough breakup, and I think it might be important as well to add in that I'm 22 years old, and this is my first corporate job. I showed up to work every day, I would not bring my problems into work, and I don't mention anything to anyone. Well, that is, except for at my work party. I was really upset, and there's 2 girls working with me, and I told them about my breakup, and they were very empathetic, and they went through the same stuff. However, when our male colleagues got involved, they overheard me talking, and they feigned sympathy, and asked me more questions about it, to which stupid me with 2 glasses of wine probably said more than I should have. I said I'm very upset that I loved him, and all this other stuff. Anyways, I basically just spoke about my ex-boyfriend pretty much the entire time, and my manager, who is Human Resources of my company, was not there. However, now, 3 weeks after the party, she's finally back in the office, and she said to me that she regrets to have to say this, but I need to be more professional at work events. And this just felt so embarrassing. I told her that I'm very surprised since, you know, I spoke to the girls, and it's the men that were asking me more questions. But she told me that it was actually the male colleagues who approached her and told her that they are concerned about me. I told her that I'm very embarrassed and that I don't think I overstepped in the things that I said, but she rehearsed to me that this was not an HR meeting. It's just simply that she wants to warn me to not share too much, especially to the male colleagues. She was very sweet about it and said that she was embarrassed to bring it up to me herself because she's been in the same situation, and this situation has happened to a lot of the girls at work, but ultimately she just told me that I need to be careful. And honestly, I'm so embarrassed. I know I overshared too much, but it didn't help that all of them seemed genuinely curious and sympathetic, and now they're just going straight to my manager about it. What should I do? Oh man, this is so stupid. First of all, it seems like the guys did that on purpose because you were just a little bit tipsy and obviously very upset. Because like, dude, you were asking her, not the other way around. These guys were literally going up to you and being like, "Hey, what's going on? What's wrong? Tell me more about your problems." And then for them to turn around and be like, "Oh yeah, this new girl's being really toxic and weird. She's sharing so much about her life. I can't believe it." Like, that's so annoying and stupid. Like, why would you do that? So honestly, if I was in your shoes, I would never trust these people ever again. I would never tell them anything about myself, and I would just genuinely be like, okay, we're gonna keep this at work and we're gonna keep this at home. And I will never mix these two together ever again because clearly you have some male colleagues who just absolutely suck. And that is absolutely not your fault, but instead it definitely is theirs. Am I the jerk for breaking up with my boyfriend because of his ex? As she is literally all over him all the time and constantly making me uncomfortable in ways that are completely inappropriate. Because right now I'm honestly not sure what to do. Here's what's going on. So I've been dating a guy for a little over a year, and we became boyfriend and girlfriend in February of this year, but there's always been one consistent issue: his ex-girlfriend of 6 months. The first time I met her was at our first date. She and her family were at the same restaurant, and she brought her 3 children to the table that we were eating at. My partner also met her parents during this date. I laughed it off as it was incredibly awkward and an unlucky first date. He then tells me that she called him crying a few days later, and he actually met up with her and she tried to come on to him, and he rejected her. She also texted him a few times. One time it was a photo of her in her PJs. I'm sure you know the kind where it has no face in it, but you can definitely see her chest. And she also stopped his mom in a supermarket to chat one time. Now, throughout all of this, my boyfriend claims that she is a really nice person deep down, and they've been friends for years before they dated. I told him not to block her as they have friends in common, and I didn't want to make a big deal about it or seem jealous, but it only got worse. I started to get fed up, and I said that if she was your friend, she would respect our relationship. She also told him that she had been contacting him because she didn't think that we were that serious. And it's like, are you kidding me right now? It got to the point where we hashed things out, and she apologized and everything seemed fine. Well, ever since that incident, she texted text him late one night telling him he needs to get over her, which made me see red. I ended up calling her and I shouted at her and told her how fake and immature she was being, considering she was older than me. I really lost my temper and my boyfriend said it was hot, which I completely hated. I resented my partner for putting me in that position where I lost my cool. But this is not all that went down. It was another ridiculous situation that felt like some kind of Love Island triangle. Me and my boyfriend are at an engagement party for his best friend, and she turned up alone, by the way, and proceeded to talk to my boyfriend. He said he tried to ignore her, but at one point told my boyfriend that she had been on a date recently and the guy reminded her of him. I hoped he would have just ignored her or told her that she was being inappropriate, but he said something along the lines of, well, it won't ever be me. And he said this while I was in the next room. At this point, I'm just so done with this drama. This has been a consistent issue that has been unresolved throughout us dating, and a part of me feels like he enjoyed the attention and has been unfaithful in some way. So honestly, would I be the jerk if I broke up with my boyfriend because of his ex? Because right now I'm seriously frustrated. Now, before I give any of my responses here, I think the original poster did the right thing because she updates us by saying that she broke up with her boyfriend. And oh my gosh, I'm so glad you did that because that's exactly what I would have done if I was in your shoes. Like seriously, think about it for a second. This is some silly stuff going on, like honestly. Your boyfriend is literally playing both sides of the fence, dude. He's doing very little to avoid his ex-girlfriend while not even pretending like he's in a relationship with you. And that is so dumb. Like seriously, it's time to cut her off and move on. And because he can't do that, I honestly don't blame you for breaking up with him because in my opinion, that really was the right thing to do. My toxic boss tries to gaslight me into believing that all of my coworkers hate me, treating me like garbage and making my life a living nightmare. So I decided to get some petty revenge by literally throwing a party while he went away on vacation, giving him a taste of his own medicine of what it's like to feel left out. Here's how I did it. I'm an 18-year-old female and I work as a custodian for an elementary school. I recently just graduated from high school this past May, and I got hired for this job at the beginning of my senior year. At the start of my employment, things were going good. My boss, the head custodian of the school, was very nice to me, and it seemed like we were going to get along well, but it wasn't until January of this year when things really took a turn. I'm not sure why, but my boss totally flipped on me and started to treat me like garbage. He constantly berated me, accused me of not doing any work during my shift, which was completely not true, gaslit me into believing all the other staff in the building hated me, which was also not true, told me to get over it when I asked for time off to grieve over a pet who suddenly passed, and much, much more. He even went as far as trying to prove I was a horrible employee to the principal of the school in some kind of attempt to get me fired, but she thankfully dismissed his claims and sided with me since he had no real evidence. It's a long story that probably deserves its own separate post, but with all this being said, the way he treated me, among other things not related to work, really started to take a toll on my mental health throughout the latter half of my senior year. My grades started to slip and I got really depressed, but I refused to quit due to familial pressure, needing the money for college, and the flexible hours the job offered me. Fast forward to now and I'm still working with this absolute piece of garbage over the summer. And before anybody says anything, yes, I am hoping to transfer to a different custodial position at a different school with hopefully a better work environment, but as of right now, that hasn't happened yet. Now, I don't know why, but since summer started, he has flipped back to being Mr. Nice Guy and suddenly wants to erase everything that's happened between us and act like we're best friends, which I'm absolutely not having at all. He hasn't even apologized. It pisses me off so much, but I just try to keep calm. Anyways, with that in mind, it's now time for some very petty revenge. Now, I really love to bake and I've wanted to bake something for my coworkers for a while now. My coworkers are all really nice to me and I felt they deserved a little treat for all that they do. However, if I brought a treat into work, I would have to share it with my boss too, which really bothered me. But luckily for me, this week he was going on a camping trip with his family, so this was my time to strike. I picked one of the days my boss was gone, and I told myself I was going to make a dessert and bring it into work with me then. But that's not all, because I decided to take it a step further. The day before I was going to bring in a treat, I sent a text message in our group chat, a group chat with my boss in it. I informed everyone on the chat that I was planning on bringing in a dessert the next day, and if any of them wanted to bring something in as well, they are free to do so. Well, needless to say, my coworkers delivered, and everybody brought something, meaning that I had coordinated a giant dessert party. I also picked the one day of the week that teachers and other staff were allowed to be in the building, so I got to share my baking with just about everybody who works at the school except for my boss. Now, the best part is that since he's camping somewhere with no cell service, he didn't see the messages coordinating until he got back. So when he leaves his camping trip, he's gonna see that everybody had a party without him. He should be back to work from his camping trip in 2 days, so we will see if he brings it up then, but I honestly think this was a complete success. Dude, I love this so much, especially for a coworker who is a piece of garbage, and it sounds like your boss absolutely absolutely fits the bill. I hate the kind of people who act like that, where they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna make it seem like everybody hates you, and then try to turn around and be like, oh, we're just gonna treat that like water under the bridge. And that is so frustrating. Like, seriously, get a life. It's a little too late to try and act like you're extending an olive branch of some kind, dude. Like, you're a complete piece of garbage and I want nothing to do with you. And for the sake of the original poster, I hope you get transferred way sooner than later, because this does not sound fun. So good for you for throwing that party, because this guy deserves to not be a part of it, because he literally tried to ostracize you from everybody else, and I think it's time that he got a taste of his own medicine.
Mechanic says, "That's not my problem," to my vehicle issues, so I make it his problem. Some intro and backstory. My dad was a mechanic for 20 or more years, and for as long as I can remember, I drove him nuts because I'd go around the house with a screwdriver that he'd left out and take everything apart, because I wanted to see how it worked. As I grew older, I developed an affinity towards computers and electronics, which led me to be that kid in high school who changed his grades, crashed the school district's servers, and used the net send command with great success. I'd spend my weekends either with my grandparents and uncle working on science projects, or dragging my dad outside to help me fix my car, which consisted of him telling me that he'd help once I got it taken apart. Those figure-it-out lessons were probably the greatest gift he could have given me growing up. I joined the US Army in March of 2004 and went into communications, or commo for short, where I managed to go from private, E1, when I joined, to sergeant, E5, by the time I returned from my deployment at the beginning of 2007. After returning home, I was subsequently transferred from a light infantry unit, walking everywhere, to a mechanized infantry unit, riding in an armored vehicle everywhere, and placed in charge of the battalion commo shop because the current person running the commo shop was scheduled to retire in a few months, and I was the only other NCO. This is where things got interesting and my great commo vs mechanics rivalry story starts. So, commo vs mechanics. As anyone else that was in the US Army can attest to, every Monday is, or was, motor pool maintenance, which essentially means to make sure all the tanks, Bradley fighting vehicles, or anything else with a motor works the way it should. This included testing all the radios and communication equipment as well. If it didn't work, we filled out the maintenance forms with the correct shop and have them fix it. All the issues would be later consolidated into a report that the leadership team would review. If a review was on that report, the leadership team wanted to know why it wasn't fixed. I ran my shop using the same approach my dad taught me, which was, figure it out, and don't come to me with a problem unless you have a solution. One Monday morning, shortly after taking charge of the commo shop, one of my soldiers came to me with a problem that he couldn't figure out, and asked if I could come help him. I agreed and followed him over to the Bradley fighting vehicle that was giving him problems. After a few hours of troubleshooting, we finally traced the problem back to the Bradley's slip ring. We double and triple checked that indeed was the problem because 1. Slip rings in general have a low failure rate, and 2. It wasn't something we could fix on our own. It required help from the mechanics because the slip ring required taking apart the interior of the Bradley's turret to actually get to it. So I went to the mechanics to get their help so we could fix the problem. This is where I learned the mechanics didn't like the commo shop. I was essentially told by the motor chief to F off and the slip ring is a commo issue, and it's the commo shop's job to fix it, not theirs. I was annoyed at the response and tried to insist that we needed his help. However, I was promptly shut down and told to pound sand. At this point, I was beyond angry. I'd tried the official way. I even swallowed my pride and asked nicely. Both times I was crapped on. I decided I was going to play global thermonuclear war and teach him a lesson that neither he nor anyone else in his shop would forget. So I went to my guys and told them I'd be back in about an hour or two because I needed to run home and grab some stuff. When I got home, I went directly for the garage and started packing all the wrenches, impacts, and sockets that I could fit into my portable toolbox. I also loaded up the portable air compressor and any extension cords I could find, and made my way back to the motor pool. Once I got back to the motor pool, I had my guys locate every extension cord they could find around the office, because I could only find one in my garage, and I needed to help me run power out to the Bradley that we were going to have to fix ourselves. Meanwhile, I also had 2 of the guys run to HQ and find me 2 of the largest empty coffee cans they could find. I ended up having to tell them twice because the first time they thought I was joking. They couldn't understand why I needed a coffee can of all things. When they returned with the coffee cans, I had everything in place. I had power, compressed air, tools, and a place to neatly put all the bolts, nuts, and washers I was about to remove. Under normal circumstances, I would only remove the things that absolutely had to be removed. The fewer things that have to be put back, the better. But these weren't normal circumstances, and I had absolutely no intention of putting anything back together. It was about lunchtime, and I decided my way of fixing this issue probably wasn't the best example to set for my team. So I sent them to lunch and told them I'd handle this issue so they could focus on the other vehicles when they got back. For the next few hours, I proceeded to dismantle every single bolt I could find. I removed seats, interior plates, shelves, pretty much anything that wasn't electrical or commo related got removed. I'd then place all of the newly removed hardware in the coffee can. By the time I reached the turret, I'd filled up both coffee cans with nuts, bolts, and washers, so I had to go and find something else to start putting all this stuff in. Luckily, we had Ziploc bags by the dozen laying around the office. I grabbed a couple of those and went back to having fun taking apart the Bradley. I finally reached the slip ring and managed to luck out. I didn't have to replace the slip ring after all. Turns out the mechanics didn't install one of the cable mounts, and one of the commo cables got snagged and subsequently cut. It took me less than 15 minutes at that point to replace the cable and missing cable mount. Of course, the fact that I completely removed everything in the way helped, because now I didn't have to fish the cable through anything. Once I replaced the cable and made sure all of the other commo equipment worked, I figured while I'd taken everything apart, it would be much easier to fix any other problems they might be having. All commo systems checked out, my job was done. Everything that I'd taken out of the Bradley was then gently and neatly stacked in the interior of the vehicle. I put the lids on the coffee cans, zipped up the bags, pulled out my trusty Sharpie and wrote bolts on each of them. Once everything was tidied up, I went off to find the owner of the Bradley fighting vehicle and let him know his commo issue was fixed, but he should probably have a mechanic look at his Bradley because I had to disassemble some, and by some I meant most, of the vehicle in order to get to the part I needed to replace, and I couldn't remember how everything went back together. I stared out of my office window for the rest of the day, waiting for the mechanics to get around to looking at the Bradley. I still remember the reaction of the motor chief when he looked inside that vehicle, and if I didn't know any better, I could have sworn his head rotated around 3 times and damn near popped off. His reaction was absolutely priceless. I knew he was about to storm into my shop in a fit of rage, so I got up and decided it was probably best to meet him outside in Motorpool. As soon as I reached earshot distance, he started screaming and demanding I put the vehicle back the way I found it. However, I was having none of that. I simply shook my head and told him, "It's a mechanical issue now, and it's not my job. I asked for your help in the beginning, and I was told no because it, quote, wasn't your job. I'm just a commo guy. I didn't know what needed to be removed so I could fix the commo issue in the slip ring, so I removed everything. If someone from your team would have been there, I think this whole misunderstanding could have been avoided." That vehicle remained on the weekly report for the next 3 weeks while they figured out what bolts went where. After that incident, I was never told "it's not my job" ever again, and the mechanics were more than willing to help me fix any issues that came up. Once I managed to earn the respect of the mechanics and rebuild the bridges my predecessor burned, life was great. By the time I left the unit, we ended up starting to cross-train each other's team members so we could fix things faster as they came up. In short, needed help from the mechanics to replace a commo part in a tracked vehicle, mechanic told me it wasn't his job. So I took the entire vehicle apart, fixed my part, and made the reassembly his job. Am I the jerk? Yeah, I literally don't understand how that first part wasn't the mechanic's job. We need this mechanical component removed, please. This could have been an annoying fight to get to superiors and making everything into a long drawn-out hierarchical fight for everyone. And what we got is so much more entertaining than a bureaucratic war involving written complaints and chains of command, so we on the channel thank you for that, author. And you achieved your goals by trying the right thing, being rebuffed, and then following your instructions to the letter and achieving maximum destruction on the party standing in your way. And it sounds like it even worked for you. They knew that skiving off on work that was debatably their job would mean even more work that was definitely their job. Itty-bitty, frustrating bits of work with lots of swearing and being unsure of which bolts go where. So even if the head mechanic guy hated your guts for the rest of time, hopefully his team got assigned to you and worked out that you all weren't so bad. Magnificent jerkery from you on a bigger jerk in the name of achieving harmony. Inspiring stuff, really. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. So I'm not allergic to strawberries. When I was younger, my favorite fruit was strawberries. I could eat pounds and pounds of them and not get sick. Unfortunately, they're also my mother's favorite fruit. Every time we'd buy some, she'd tell me to only eat half, since the other half were hers. Of course, being 6 years old and home alone, that didn't give me much good impulse control. So I ate all of the box. My mother whooped my butt and sent me to bed without dinner. I thought that was the end of it. Mother, on the other hand, decided she was sick of me eating all the strawberries in the house. She decided she was going to stop me from eating them once and for all. So she decided to change the detergent and do all of my laundry. Now, I have very sensitive skin and I'm allergic to a lot of things, including fragrances. I break out into hives when I deal with an allergen, so she changed the detergent to a very abrasive one to get back at me. The next day, I broke out in hives at school and fainted. Mum wasn't done then. She took me to the doctor for a blood test since we were still trying to figure out if I was diabetic, and told me that the doctors think I'm allergic to strawberries. This was devastating. I was told that it could have been worse and that I could have died from even a little bit. It's been about 14 years since I've had even a single bite of strawberry. I barely remember what they taste like. However, I found out all of this at a sudden family party when introducing my boyfriend. I told him about how I can't have strawberries for dessert. My mum walks up, looks at me funny. Of course you can, you're not allergic. The second I reminded her, she began to laugh. Oh, you were never allergic. I found out the rest from my dad. Thanks, Mum. Hate you too. As an afternote, my mum is not a terrible person. She's a little bit mentally unhinged, but she does her best with what she has. She thought this was the best way to teach me a lesson, and it did. It's not the best way to go about it, however. I fainted not because of the hives, but because I had forgotten to eat my snack, according to my dad. I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes when I hit that age. Second, we were a poor family who couldn't afford childcare. My cousins lived in the apartments above us, and my mother worked at the grocery store that was a 5 minutes walk even when I was 6. She was our only provider due to my dad's jerkishness. When we finally moved for her new job, we got childcare, but I was too old for that by then. The big deal was that when I was taking away all the treats in our house for myself. That's why my mother was upset. We rarely got anything sweet, let alone fresh fruit. And that's why I went crazy about it. Well, look, your mum definitely isn't in the clear in the narrator's books, but then again, I can imagine my mum would be livid if 6-year-old me ate all of the treats that she occasionally brought for herself. I don't know that she'd have done something that would have caused me to, break out in hives and potentially faint, but I would have been in very clear and direct trouble. I'm a little worried about the fact that the kid fainted regardless of what the dad claims about the snacking, but as with all of these, I wasn't there. Honestly, punishments like this and the butt-whooping that our author received seem pretty typical of a lot of boomer stories about what their parents did to punish them. If I heard about modern parents doing this, with our wealth of information on the long-term effects on children's psyche, I'd be wondering if I should call social services. Try to scam my dad out of £20,000? Prepare to have regulators on your case and pay through the nose. So this happened a couple of years ago. My dad occasionally sends money back to his home country via these money transfer companies, and he'd recently sold his shop, so he wanted to send some of the money back home. Now, my dad isn't the most savvy of people, and me and my brother regularly have to keep an eye on him to make sure he doesn't get scammed. We were a bit worried when he said he wanted to send such a large amount of money in one go, and suggested using a bank to do it. While it would cost a fair amount in fees, it would be legit and it would arrive on time. However, he wanted to go with this money transfer company that he saw an ad for in the newspaper, as they had lower fees and promised the money would arrive in a week or so. So we accompany him to the shop and discuss how much it would cost and when it would arrive, and the guy gives his best assurances that the money will arrive and gives a good price, and of course we pay him the money and leave. We weren't stupid enough to pay in cash and have no trace whatsoever. We took precautions and paid by debit card, so there's a trace in case he tries anything funny. So a couple of days goes by and Dad periodically checks his bank account back home and checks if the money arrived, and of course, we say things like, "Give it time, it'll come soon." After 2 weeks of still nothing, he calls up and asks what's going on. The guy says it's just delayed, but nothing to worry about, so Dad hangs up satisfied. A week later, another call and another excuse. We think, okay, this is irritating but fair enough, and not much we can do but be patient. More time goes by and the excuses are now getting less professional. Now it's, "Oh, we had to use the money you gave us to pay off the previous guy who sent money, so when the next guy pays, you'll get yours." At this point, we're getting seriously worried and thinking, what the frick? Is this guy going bankrupt or something else? We investigate all of our options with the bank and seeing if we can do any claimbacks, as it wasn't a fraud case and my dad paid willingly, so it's not their problem. We go to the shop to have a conversation with the guy and see if he actually plans on paying up or not, and give him one last chance for benefit of the doubt, and of course he gives us the same BS assurances, and still no money transfer 2 weeks after the meeting. So now begins the revenge that you've been waiting for. In the UK, all financial organizations, no matter how small, are heavily regulated by government authorities. And if you run a business to do with money, they'll be watching you carefully. My brother, being a banker, knew exactly which authorities to contact, and he launched a complaint against this organization. He sent them proof of payment and explained to them how they refused to send the money. Within a couple of days, they came down hard on him. Now, instead of my dad chasing him, this guy started chasing after my dad, begging him to withdraw the complaint as it was affecting his business, as the regulator was threatening investigations and a possible shutdown. The guy kept saying he'll send the money soon, but please withdraw the complaint. Of course, we knew that as soon as the complaint was withdrawn, it would be near impossible to recomplain, so we refused to withdraw until he paid up with the compensation, of course. We also made sure that all the correspondence was made through the regulator as he tried to call up my dad and get him to withdraw the case with his sob stories, which we also mentioned to the regulator. After he realized he wasn't getting anywhere, he eventually paid up the full 20 grand and a further £1,500 in compensation for all the distress he caused, and a letter of apology to my dad, and the case was withdrawn. He has scammed other people like my dad with his business, but as they weren't educated enough to go to the regulator with a complaint, he must have gotten away with a lot over the years. So it felt good to make him realize that he can't mess with everyone he perceives to be an easy target. In short, Dad tried to send 20 grand back to his home country via a money transfer company. The guy wouldn't pay up after taking the money, so he sent the regulator after his butt and got him to pay the full amount plus £1,500 compensation. Look, don't get me wrong, I'm glad that this absolute con artist had to pay more than £1,000 extra, but I seriously hope that you didn't actually withdraw the complaint. Or that, given that the agents involved normally take this kind of thing really seriously, that they didn't let you withdraw it. Because letting creeps like this continue their shifty enterprises really is no good. Honestly, if he'd screwed you around that much and given you vague, unprofessional excuses, I would advocate for doing the same thing to him. "Oh yep, sorry, we'll get around to removing the complaint soon, I promise." He deserves no better. I'm sure that he's scammed people out of their money before and will continue to do so if allowed. When the lawyer steps in to make everything better. Worked a decade as a salesman at a stereo shop. I've had hundreds of people threaten to sue, and not a single one has. A few stand out, and I was just reminded of this gem. I sold a kid, 18 or 19 years old, a speaker, and mentioned it has a manufacturer's warranty against defects. If it's not working, we just swap it out. The kid comes back later that day and says the speaker doesn't work and he wants a warranty replacement. I open the box and the speaker has a gaping hole in it. He was screwing it in, slipped, and put the entire drill bit and chuck through the speaker cone. It's obvious what happened. The shape and position of the hole, the fact that not all of the screw holes had marks from being used, among other things. I gave him a, "I'm sorry, but this clearly has physical damage and not a manufacturer defect. I can't use the warranty about this." He debates, I hand him the warranty information from the manual, he reads it and accepts his fate. It specifically notes damage due to improper installation, accident as not being covered. The kid walks out with his destroyed speaker. Half an hour later, his parents are in the shop screaming that they're going to sue us, it's our responsibility to replace, it has a warranty, that we'd formed a verbal contract with our client, the kid, that we'd swap it out if there was an issue. Dad mentions he's a lawyer a few times during his tirade. I ask, "Sir, have you read the warranty information?" "No, that doesn't matter." And I cut him off to say, "So you're not a lawyer then?" "Of course I am. Are you accusing me of lying?" Lawyers always read a contract before debating it. Misrepresenting yourself as an attorney in order to obtain benefit for another is a criminal offense, sir. I point out the cameras and mention they have audio. This guy went silent, looked a bit shocked, and walked out with his broken speaker, muttering something about how he's never coming back. My manager leaned over and asked, "Is that true? Is it illegal to impersonate a lawyer?" I said, "Damned if I know." So I'm not a lawyer. Am I a jerk though? Jerk vigilante. So I don't think not doing your due diligence discriminates you from being a lawyer, it just makes you a lousy one. But the thing is, if you are a lawyer, you probably have a good idea of general consumer protection laws. Luckily, this idiot dad's front caved pretty easily. I do feel for the kid though. I sympathize with saving up all of your pocket money for something and then immediately breaking said thing. Especially when you've saved for weeks for said toy or Warhammer model. Oh boy. All the trauma is flooding back to me. Time to go before you all hear a grown man weep. Have a nice day, folks. Mailman doesn't let anyone use the elevator. I make him regret that decision. Gather round, children, as I tell you the tale of the time I nearly threw up sprinting up 7 flights of stairs. So yesterday, I was returning home with a heavy bag of groceries. As I approached my apartment building, I saw a delivery man with a parcel trolley waiting at the door. I decided to open it for him so he could get in while I checked my mailbox. As I entered the building, I heard him get on the elevator. He must have heard me enter the building as well, but he didn't bother to hold the lift for me. No big deal, I'll just wait for it to come back down. The elevator stopped on the 4th floor, and I noticed it stayed at the 4th floor for a lot longer than it normally should, almost like it was stuck. After a moment, it started moving, except instead of going down to me, it was going up and stopped at the 5th floor. Again, it was stopping for an unusually long time. It was at this point I realized that the courier must have been holding up the elevator doors with his trolley so that they couldn't close, meaning the elevator wouldn't move on. Annoyed because I have a heavy bag of shopping, I live on the 7th floor and we only have one elevator, I was even more incensed when I saw the elevator carry on going further up and holding at other floors. At this point, I'd been waiting for a good couple of minutes. So, I decided to take the stairs to the 7th floor. However, I ran as fast as I could. Why? Because the elevator was coming down to the 16th floor, and on my way to the 7th floor, I pressed for the elevator on each floor I passed. If he enjoyed holding up the lift so much, he could spend extra time in it on the way down. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm as lazy as it gets, and now I'm feeling the pain in my thighs from my Stairmaster challenge, but it felt worth it. I waited in the stairwell and listened to the elevator stop on my floor, doors open, doors close, stop on the 6th, and so on and so forth. When it's hit the 5th, I could just about hear the courier say, "For frick's sake," as he realized no one was getting on the elevator. I was out of breath and had a good sweat going on, but it was worth it in the name of pettiness. Am I the jerk? I mean, I don't know that the delivery guy in question was so much of a jerk as he was just kind of inconsiderate. But surely, he must have considered that in the time to go up 16 floors and stop a minute or two at each, you're definitely going to hold up and inconvenience multiple people. And I don't know if this is one of those Amazon couriers who's going to be disciplined if he doesn't make his deadline and has to pee in a bottle while he drives, but honestly, if you're going to do this kind of thing, for all you know, you're making elderly people wait 15 minutes or more on their feet for the elevator. It's a mixed bag, and this is the definitive petty revenge, so let's just enjoy that aspect of it, as well as the fact that our protagonist was inspired to commit to more exercise than they'd undergone in their life to get their own back. When you do know the owner. I'm not a server, but I have a funny story that involves an owner and a Karen. So where I live, there's this really good coffee shop that makes amazing coffees as well as amazing food. My mum, who's lived in the same town her whole life, knows the owner and she introduced me to him, and we have a chat when I'm there and he's around. So one day I'm at the coffee place and this woman comes in and she's rambling on the phone to her husband about how she needs to get some K-cups for the house because they ran out. So I'm sitting there minding my own business when I hear her huffing and puffing, and me, being the idiot that I am, decide to go help her. I'm well known at the coffee shop and they don't mind when I help people out, because it honestly looks like I work there and they don't have to pay me. So I ask her what's wrong and she says that the K-Cup prices are ridiculous. As an aside, they're not. This lady then claims that she knows the owner and if I could ring them up for her for free, because the owner always does that for her. I know that's not the case, but I decide to ask her name just in case she does know the owner and maybe they can work something out, or I can have a good laugh afterwards. This lady looks at me weirdly at first and then tells me she doesn't trust me and she'll go look for him herself. I roll my eyes and walk away, knowing exactly where he is, and I walk over to him, telling him the situation, and we walk back to Karen. I ask the owner if he knows her, and he says no. She looks dumbfounded for a second before walking out of the shop after putting the coffee cups back. Sometimes it's nice to actually know the owner. Yeah, it's a gamble to make that move in a store where you don't even recognize the face of the person walking up and asking if you need their help. Nice try, jerk. I'd say that you can't blame this lady for trying, but these people walking around and just trying to deceive staff members into getting a discount leaves a real bad taste in my mouth. What if the owner is a jerk and the staff member gets in trouble because you lied to them? In any case, it's quite funny to see this kind of person just Alt F4 out of a social situation without even acknowledging everyone. Like a kid who started losing their Dota match. It's nice when we get to see grown adults letting out their inner child, isn't it? You'd kind of wish that they'd just be more sporting and pay the extra money for that one time though, because driving to Walmart or wherever and buying the K-Cups there is just going to cost them time and petrol money at that point. Just admit defeat. Apparently, she was certain I was under 18. She didn't even ask for ID. I'm a 22-year-old, 5-foot-tall woman who wears glasses most of the time. I have contacts and makeup, but I only use them when I'm going to work, school, or at a formal setting. It's weird how a little makeup, some contacts, and a little extra maturity can magically make you appear your age or even older to people. I guess Clark Kent's disguise means a lot more than I thought. Strangely enough, I get excited when asked for my ID. I don't know why for sure, but I think it's because I like to blow expectations and get a funny reaction out of people. This one moment I'm about to share is one of my favorites because I wasn't even asked for an ID. They thought they wouldn't need to. I was at a craft store with my sister a few months ago, buying a few things for various events and holidays coming up soon. One of these events was an anime gaming convention that my sister and I like to dress up for and attend every year. My sister was planning to cosplay as the main character from Vinland Saga and needed some things to make the knives the character wields. One of these things was silver spray paint, which she had dropped into my cart when I wasn't looking. In my state, spray paint is one of those items that you have to be 18 years or older to buy and have a valid ID to prove it. I rarely buy items with restrictions like these, so I'm never really prepared to have my ID ready to prove my innocence. I sent my sister to the car while I checked out, since I thought it would be quicker. While the lady was checking out my items, I was digging for my wallet and card to pay when I hear, "I can't sell you this." I look up and see the lady holding the can of spray paint my sister was going to buy and looked confused. She then said, "I can't sell spray paint to people under the age of 18. It's illegal." It took a moment for the statement to sink in before I laughed out of pure amazement. I've never looked so young to someone that I wasn't even asked for ID before. I didn't even feel offended, just amazed. As I laughed, I started pulling out my ID while saying, "You'd be surprised at how many people think I'm that age when I'm actually 22. The lady saw my ID and her face turned to a look of surprise and embarrassment. She started apologizing while finishing checkout, but I told her it was fine before leaving. Best can of spray paint I've ever bought. Maybe I should do that more often. I don't think anyone is really a jerk in this story. This lady was just doing her job and got a little more presumptive than most. I feel like a lot of the power-hungry, petty counter-jockeys we've had in other stories would take it on themselves to be the ID police and declare that you were using a forgery to obtain your contraband spray paint. This lady was just embarrassed, and she course-corrected after her slight jumping of the starting weapon. No harm, no foul. Also, who doesn't carry around their ID with them at all times? Maybe this is a guy with pockets thing, but I honestly never leave my house without mine. Then again, in my country you can use it in most stores and services where you have memberships or accounts, so it might not be as applicable to this young lady from the States. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. I sued my boss because he fired me for wanting to attend a concert. First up, some backstory. During my gap year between studies, I decided to work for Company N. Company N was run by a husband, Dave, and wife, Karen, with their son, and basically they treated their staff like a small family. All was well for about 2 months until I realized I had to ask for a day off since I wanted to attend the last Slayer concert the band would give in my country. There was about a month to go, so I sent an email asking for the day off and explaining why. This is where everything started to go downhill. I got a reply from Karen, and her reply was weird. She stated that's not how asking for a day off works. I was confused, to say the least. Not sure what to do, I thought she wanted a more formal way of asking, so I wrote a formal email asking for the day off. She shot an email back saying that I really had to think it through what I was doing, which made even less sense to me. But I was hopeful since I never really got a specific no. The next workday rolled around. I arrived, locked up my bike, and headed inside for work. I immediately started looking for Dave to ask for answers. But before I could even open my mouth, he asked me, "Do you still want to go to that concert?" I didn't expect him to ask this so quickly and answered, "Yes." The only thing he said back was, "Okay, take off your vest and you can go home." I was stunned. And while the words started to sink in, I looked at my colleagues, which were just preparing for opening. When it finally sank in, anger flowed out. I'm not a confrontational person, so I simply took off my vest and gave it to Dave. Without a word, I left and started biking home. When I got back home, I told my mother what happened. We started sending emails for extra information and got very Karen-like emails back. After a couple of emails which basically went nowhere, I looked up the laws for immediate dismissal. After reading up about it, I learned that in my country, someone can only be immediately fired when caught stealing, frauding, the person isn't able to do the work, or refusal to do the work. I didn't do any of these. A day or two later, I met with my attorney and began the steps to sue Company N. I told my lawyer what happened in detail, and he was very confident I was in the right and that my boss was not. So, after trading even more emails between the three of us, we went to small claims. I came prepared in a suit with my attorney in tow. And Karen showed up alone. I guess she assumed she won because she thought she was in the right. The trial began and I was as professional and objective as I could be. Karen did the same, well, for about half of the trial. When she realized evidence was piling up against her, she resorted to calling me a spoiled brat, among other things I don't know the English translation for. Safe to say, that was the point the judge ruled in my favor. As per usual, I had to wait a month before I got the verdict, black on white in the mail, but I won. It may have taken about 6 months from the moment I was told to go home to the point those 6 months of pay were transferred to my bank account, but it was 100% worth it. In the end, I went to the concert, and it was the most awesome and profitable concert I've ever been to in my life. In short, got fired without a valid reason and sued the company for it, and I won 6 months' pay. Yeah, I don't understand what the employer thought was going to go on here. Look, maybe we can say that they assumed that, like the majority of cases, the fired employee wouldn't try to sue and just spend their time trying to find another job and recoup their losses. But then Karen shows up to court acting like this is all a done deal in her favor. These people just seemingly had no idea that workers have rights. Perhaps if things were really so perfect there up until this incident, that might go some way to explaining why they were so hilariously uninformed about the fundamentals of holidays and the hiring and firing of their workers. In any case, terrific that you got 6 months of wages for very little effort on your part, and we can only hope that they look up laws and treat their employees better going forward. Entitled mother wanted me to let her kid color in my book. This happened yesterday. After work, I had to take my car to get it inspected. An oil change and a car wash. I knew that this might take a while to get done as I was going after work and it might get busy. I planned ahead and brought with me my sketchbook and nice colored ink pens. I'm a doodler, So even though I'm not sketching profiles or landscapes, I'm still drawing mandalas and things like that. Things that take a lot of time and effort to make. Skip forward to me sitting in a busy waiting room. The couches are all taken, so I grab a seat at a table, which is actually preferred since I'm sketching. I first noticed Entitled Mother and Entitled Kid sitting on one of the couches. Entitled Mother was scrolling through her phone while Entitled Kid was complaining about being bored because they'd been there forever. I pull out my moleskin sketchbook, black ink pen, and start working on a doodle that I've been working on for a few days now. A few minutes later, bump, 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 and I hear the pitter-patter of tiny Entitled Kid feet come up next to me. "What's you drawing?" "I'm working on this doodle," and I showed it to her. "That just looks like a bunch of weird lines." Followed by long silence from me. Can I draw too?" "Do you have your own paper and pens?" "No." "Then I guess you'll have to wait until you get home to draw." But you have extra paper and pens. Let me use them. You're supposed to share." "Sorry, kid, these are my things and I don't want you using them." This is when the kid starts crying. The crying is what cues the entitled mum to look up from her phone, finally. The snotty brat runs over to mum and says, "That mean lady won't let me color in her book." Mother gets up from her seat and comes over to me. "My kid wants to have some of your paper and pens so she can color. You need to do it because she's bored." "No, these are my things and I have every right to not want some random child using them." I then tried to explain to her that I don't like ripping pages out of my sketchbook because it might ruin the integrity of the book, and that my ink pens are somewhat expensive, which means I don't want other people using them. All reasonable answers. But oh no, there was no convincing this entitled lady. She went off about how I wasn't actually drawing real art and how her precious daughter needs entertainment and that I have to let her have some paper or else she'll tell the manager of the car place. I was starting to get really ticked off, but I just grabbed my things and moved to an area of chairs that were on the outside patio type area. Thankfully, the mother's car was ready soon after, so she ended up leaving, but damn, I was afraid she wasn't going to let go. And given some of the stories we've encountered here before, you were very right to have that fear. It was completely ridiculous of her to make her demands that way to begin with, but I guess you can count your lucky stars that at least this wasn't one of those crazy women who end up calling in nearby security or even the cops to resolve the fact that the world doesn't give them what they want sometimes. Also, a tip for any of those who want to grab free art supplies: don't insult the artist that they're currently in possession of. It won't grease the wheels of the transaction the way that you all seem to think it will. I assume that this garage had a printer or fax machine and some pens at the desk. Why not try asking them for some A4 and blue Bics for a few minutes to spare everyone else from Tiny Tina's rampage? Best college speaker ever. When finishing up my degree in criminal justice, we had to learn about how the justice system works and how sometimes it doesn't. For about 2 weeks, we studied a case from the early 90s of a woman who had killed her husband. Because the case is public record and a very interesting read, look up Betty Freiberg, 1993. The setting was a small Iowa town, and the husband was the town drunk. Everyone in town knew him for a drunk, a brawler, a womanizer, and overall just a bad guy. His wife was a stay-at-home mum, as she wasn't allowed to work or leave the house aside from getting groceries. He would go home, be violent, and commit the unspeakable act, and the cycle would go on, and the whole town knew. The neighbors were a quarter mile down the road but would still call the police when they heard noises. It was well documented, and because he was never a threat to their daughter, the police did nothing aside from taking him to jail like a revolving door. And each time he got out, the whole thing would start again. Their daughter was away at college but came home for Thanksgiving. While the father was at work, the daughter told the mother that her father had also committed the unspeakable act against her, and that she'd even had to go to a clinic to get rid of a pregnancy because of it. This was the breaking point for the mother. She got her revenge 1,000-fold. When daughter went back to school after the holidays and the husband came home, Our Lady killed him with his hunting rifle at the kitchen table. The table is important because it was a big farm table used for chopping up deer and other livestock. Doing the butchering was her job, and she was good at it. If I could find the case report, it has pictures of the table and clear marks of chopping. She chopped up her husband and scattered his body over neighboring farms, and fed what she could to her livestock and cleaned up. Months went by and winter came and left. Police investigating his disappearance even questioned her while sitting at the same table drinking coffee. She explained the marks on the table by explaining that she'd butchered her own meat and showed the officers her deep freeze. The investigation went on for months until finally a neighbor's dog brought back a body part. They identified it as belonging to him and she was arrested on the spot. She pled not guilty and refused any offers. It went to trial and 12 of her peers judged her not guilty due to extenuating circumstances. She confessed to the crime, explained why she did it, and how she had no real choice because no one was going to help her. The farm was hers and she refused to give it up as it had been her family's home. She was let go entirely for the murder charge. The next week we had Betty as a speaker to the class to discuss the case, and she was awesome. At the time, ironically, she sold dismemberment insurance for Aflac. Betty, if you ever hear this, know you're seen as a figurehead for battered women, and you pulled off the best revenge I've ever been able to study. Holy crap, Betty! I can't even blame her. It sounds like she did the world a favor. I'd argue that I'm not sure it equates to a 100-fold revenge, given that it sounds like he was being a horrible human being for many, many years before finally being brought to task. But also, I wouldn't want to wish on Betty the task of extracting the full, equal punishment for everything he had done during his life. She quickly and cleanly rid herself of a problem, and it seemed like none of her peers or even the local officials took much issue with the way she did it. It's kind of hilarious that she ended up selling dismemberment insurance, which I didn't even know was a specific kind of insurance one could take up until reading the story. I wonder if they hired her based on her experiences or in spite of them. You never know with these local celebrity types. Karen says she knows the owner and will get him fired, but he is the owner. First, let me explain a few things here. This is not my story as such, but I got to witness it firsthand. A good friend of mine is from a family that owns 3 very successful Italian restaurants, with a pizza oven that uses actual wood, really top of the line. So he learned the business basically from the day he could walk. When he was 25, he had a good business idea. A place in the middle of the city that sells mostly slices out of a window, but also whole pizza, pasta dishes and salad, and does delivery. Plus a few small tables inside if someone really does want to eat here. So he created a solid business plan and had his eyes on a prime location. It's 50 meters away from the biggest parking area in the city with 400 parking spots, where several times a year we have big city fairs, and anyone who wants to go to the park strolls right by there. So his dad said he'd finance him, but as a credit to be paid back in a timely manner. They agreed on everything, and a year later he opened up. The story takes place about 2 years after they've opened, and the place is hot. He's already repaid about 75% of the credit in a mere 2 years. Usually there's a line for the slices, which are from a family-sized pizza like 60 centimeters across, and you get an eighth of the pizza for €2.50 to €3.50 depending on what's on the pizza. We, me and my friend, are sitting on a table playing chess, while his guys run the shop. He had already worked a full 11 hours that day. Now in comes a baby boomer couple, and it was clear as day that the lady with the you-know-which haircut rules this particular relationship with an iron fist. They sit down on the table next to us, and after not even a minute, she rudely asked us why she has no menu yet, and to get off our lazy butts. I already wanted to tell her I don't work here, but my friend winked at me and walked over to their table, giving them our menus. It's about time you get off your lazy butts. Remember, she's waited less than a minute. You can't play chess when you have people waiting. What kind of crappy service is this? So he took their drink orders and walked behind the bar to make their drinks right away. They had to wait maybe 3 minutes for their drinks. They'd ordered a beer that took a long time to do correctly. Hefeweizen for you Germans. This story plays in Germany. About time. Did you have to brew it first? What is taking so long? And my friend's patience is starting to wear thin, but he stays friendly. You saw me walk to the bar and make your drinks right away, then return right away. Those beers take a while to pour correctly. I'm sorry, but there's no way I could have brought them to you any quicker. Well, now he's done it. We are customers, and this is how you talk to us? Ever heard of the customer is always right? How can you be so rude to paying customers? Now my friend really has had enough. I was very respectful towards you while you were rude from the very moment you came in here. The moment he said that, she got this weird grin on her face, and you could tell this was exactly what she wanted. "Shut up! How dare you! I'll have you know me and the owner are old friends. I'll have your job over this. Now get me your manager." My friend actually plays along. "Please, I need this job." "Too late. You should have thought about this before you treated guests this rudely. Now, get me the manager." "Right away, miss." So he went behind the bar and had a short talk to one of the older guys working there. Both returned to the table. The older guy says, "What seems to be the problem, ma'am?" And the lady suddenly begins playing the sweet old lady. "When we came here, your server sat there with someone and played chess. We waited and finally asked nicely if we could have a menu. He rolled his eyes at us and gave us the menu from his table. Then we ordered drinks and he walked over, made our drinks, and then just stood there for a good 10 minutes before he brought out the beer. And then when I politely asked him to bring out beer, he was really rude to me. Since I know the owner, we eat here all the time, and usually the service is excellent, I demand you fire him and comp our meals." The older guy turns to my friend. "Is that really what happened?" "Of course not. She came..." And then of course the lady is suddenly void of all the friendliness she had had before and starts screeching. "What are you asking him for? I just told you what happened. Are you calling me a liar? Wait till the owner hears about this." At this point, my friend and the old guy could no longer hold it back and they started laughing. "You think this is funny? Never ever have I been so insulted." At this point, my friend finally breaks the act. "Yeah, I know. Wait till the owner hears of this." "Oh, wait! The owner already did hear of this. I am the owner, and I've never seen you before in my life, nor have you ever eaten here. You two are just trying to scam a free meal out of me by being impossibly difficult till the server finally snaps or does something wrong, so that you can ask for a manager and lie to him about what happened. Now, you pay for your beer and then you go, and don't even think of coming back because you're banned." Wow, I had no idea people could get that red in the face. She put €10 on the table. "Now, get out." And they shuffled out, never to return. Boy, was that the most entertaining attempt to scam him I've ever witnessed. We'll add this to the very long list of things that everyone in hospitality has ever wished that they could do at some point. I'll be honest though, the owner does present an idea of these sorts of customers that I've never actually contemplated before. I always assumed that those people, for a lack of a better word, were just out of touch and impatient, and they couldn't contemplate a world that doesn't actually revolve around them. Never in all of my restauranting days did I imagine that any of them were actively trying to trip me up to avoid paying. I'm a guy who's easily rattled, so if any of mine were actually this kind of sociopath, I probably came into dangerous reach of being tripped up any number of times. Thank goodness that some of my bosses were incredibly hard-nosed tightwads who wouldn't give a free meal unless the staff member actively battered the customer with a baseball bat. I can only hope that the lady of the fabled short blonde hair was at least temporarily subdued into being a decent member of society for a few days. I know, but allow me to dream my impossible dream of a world where these awful people actually learn from their mistakes and get better. The owner of this place sounds like a real go-getter. To have a place be that successful that quickly and still be working on the front lines of his restaurant speaks of a real decent character. Today I messed up by accidentally stealing 12 bottles of wine from the supermarket. This story was written during the Rona. It went down one otherwise fine morning. I'm not a fan of grocery shopping. It's always crowded and chaotic. Usually I go together with my boyfriend so we can get it over with twice as quick. Now, with the coronavirus, they only allow X amount of people in the store at the same time, and they urge you to do your shopping alone and keep 1.5 meters distance. I decided I'd go by myself this morning while my boyfriend was off to work. He has an essential job and still has to go every day. Luckily, it wasn't too crowded that morning, and I could get inside without waiting. Nevertheless, I wanted to go in and out as quickly as possible. Our supermarket has had those hand scanners with which you can scan the products yourself for a while, and then after scanning, you just have to pay and get out. I really like this, because it's a lot faster than waiting in line for the cashier. Inside the supermarket, I was getting a little stressed as some people weren't keeping their distance as they should be, so I started rushing even more. They had a pretty good sale on wine, with 50% off, so I decided to take 2 boxes with me, 6 bottles each. I quickly loaded them onto my cart, grabbed the remaining items I needed, and quickly went to the pay desk. Since I had some beer and wine, a lady came over to check my age, and after that I could pay and go. Once at home, I checked the receipt to see if the discount for the wine was calculated correctly, but then I noticed the wine wasn't on the receipt at all. I must have totally forgot to scan it, so I just stole 12 bottles from the supermarket. I just went to the supermarket again to tell them about my mistake, both because it didn't feel right and because I didn't want them to find out and put me on a blacklist or something, as I go there regularly. The cashier had to laugh at my story and could understand my mistake. She was very happy I came by again to pay anyway. In short, due to the coronavirus, I rushed my grocery shopping and forgot to scan 2 boxes of wine, thus ended up leaving without paying for them. Went by the supermarket again to pay this afternoon. 2 boxes at 50% off equals 100% discount, right? Right? Okay. In all fairness, you did do the right thing, and to be honest, the narrator knows an awful lot of otherwise decent people who might have been tempted to just accept the win. But the author stuck to their morals and declined to get any cashiers in trouble or themselves on any sort of thievery wall. So whether we put this down to self-preservation or basic human decency, we can't rightly name a jerk in this story unless it's the people in the store not properly socially distancing. But even then, we can probably put it down to people being dumb humans as much as any inherent jerkery. I do not miss supermarkets during the year of 2020, let me tell you that much. It seems like the author's antsiness was down to a general fear of crowds as much as legitimate pandemic panic, however. So let's just call this story a bunch of goofs who eventually ended up doing the right thing. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. No backpacks, eh? Back in middle school after Columbine, our school went a little nuts about safety. All of a sudden, one day they said no backpacks allowed. Everyone was a little angry, but things took a turn when some of the girls started exchanging their small purses with massive, I can put 4 textbooks in here purses. At first, it was just 1 or 2 girls, but it quickly spread, and after the first week, almost every girl, about 500 of them, had a massive purse. So that weekend, I went out and bought a satchel, like a European man purse, and brought it to school. As a note, I'm a male. I got to my first class and am immediately pulled aside and told no backpacks. I politely tell them it's a purse, and if the girls can carry one, so can I. So I got dragged to the principal's office. They call my mum, who laughs at them and tells me she supports me 100%, and I can speak for myself on the matter, and to not bother her at work for stupid bullcrap. They try a ton of things to say that I can't wear a purse because I'm a boy. I ask them to have the district lawyer write me that on a school letterhead and we can go from there. At the thought of having a lawyer involved, they dropped it and I was able to wear it for the rest of the day. Tuesday, all purses were banned. Wednesday, there was a line of about 50 irate parents freaking out at the administration that they had the nerve to ban purses. How would their precious daughters carry their books and God forbid any that have hit puberty? Thursday, backpacks and purses were allowed again. I believe they eventually phased in a ban that had some very specific guidelines on allowed purse size, so it couldn't hold books, but it took several years and legal work. By then, I'd graduated and my youngest brother, I believe, had just skated past. I don't care which red state you live in, asking your school to put its discriminatory policies on a school letterhead was most likely an argument ender for most places in the 2000s. I'll admit that, if anything, we seem to have gone more radical in dictating what boys and girls can and can't wear at school since then, which is a depressing state of affairs in itself, but the lesson here largely holds true for at least the majority of places, at the time of recording. And it says a lot about how much of a legal pickle it caused that it might have taken ballpark 4 to 5 years to get properly worded rules and guidelines sorted that the school could actually stand behind. There were likely an awful lot of strange rulings and bans on paraphernalia like backpacks after Columbine, and the many incidents that have followed, all of them equally mired down and ineffective. I'm sure our American viewers would love to hear the British accented narrator talk about the one thing we could ban to solve the problem, but I'm not a stranger to the comment sections that suggest such things, so let's leave that alone for now. Is that 12-year-old even allowed to be here? As a preface to the rest of the story, I'm 25 years old, but people generally think I'm between 12 to 15. I've won many prizes in Guess Your Age carnival games this way. I was working as a volunteer in a Syrian refugee camp in France about 3 years back. It's necessary help, but not as extravagant or glamorous as it sounds. Typically, we'd spend all day chopping wood for the fireplaces or peeling potatoes. In our free time, we'd hang out with people staying there around the fireplace, but we mostly kept busy. Now, mind you, the condition for our team was that we all had to be at least 18 to do this. Working alongside my team was another team from Germany that had been there longer. The person that was sort of their unofficial leader acted a little bit weird around me. I felt a bit condescended to, and she didn't really attempt to designate any tasks to me or ask for help, but did to my teammates. I found it odd, but I didn't question it much, as I'm fully capable of finding things to do myself. After a few weeks of being there, as we peeled potatoes, her and I struck up a conversation, and I mentioned my debit card's lack of a chip and how local stores only took cards with a chip. She paused upon hearing that I had a card, blinked, turned to me and asked, "Wait, how old are you?" I replied that I was, at the time, 23, and her eyes went wide. 23? I thought you were so much younger. I kept saying, "Is that 12-year-old even allowed to be here?" to my team. She exclaimed, clearly shocked. I cackled and asked how old she was, and she sheepishly responded that she was 21. "Aha," I said with an impish grin, "younger than me." She ducked her head, laughing. I was granted quite a bit more respect and trust after that. Whoops! Who was the jerk here? I don't know. This is on her and everyone else for not asking you if you were old enough to be in that environment, or to someone else for just informing her to begin with. Kinda feels like the amount of adults in that situation should have been able to resolve it all a lot more quickly and effectively than they actually did. Still, kind of funny that you were her senior when all was said and done, and I'm told that baby faces tend to translate to general youthfulness and living longer on average, so you're winning there too. Also, kind of feels like if she actually did think you were a minor, she might have been able to ask some more questions based on the fact that most volunteer programs don't want the spot of missing or endangered children on their reputation, and probably wouldn't have hired an actual 12-year-old to do the work in an environment where they couldn't legally represent themselves on a waiver if something happens to them. Panera pays for over $120 of food instead of just an orange juice. Back in 2019, I was meeting up with a bunch of my extended family who were all attending the same wedding. As a nice gesture, I decided to pick up lunch from Panera Bread, which sells soups and sandwiches, for everyone who was coming. So I take orders from about 15 people, pick up their order from Panera, and make my way to the hotel where we'll eat. After we arrive and start eating, I notice that I'm missing an orange juice for my nephew. I call Panera and explain that, "Hey, I never got my juice. Could I just get the juice refunded?" Mind you, this was over $120 in food, and I'm just trying to get a few bucks back for the orange juice that I didn't get. They say they're not allowed and give me another number to call. So I call the corporate number and explain the situation. They say that they aren't allowed to do partial refunds, only full refunds. So to clarify, I say, "You won't refund the missing orange juice, but they can refund the whole order?" Yes, that was correct. So I requested a full refund, 2 phone calls plus the waiting, and it was granted immediately. Thanks, Panera Corporate. I know that partial refunds are difficult on some restaurant systems, but it feels like this might have been a little lazy on the part of everyone working for this company that the author and co got their food from. There were surely in-between measures that could have been taken, like maybe giving the author a $10 or even a $20 voucher to spend on something next time. You know, you didn't need to go out on more than $100 to make this one up, Panera. I appreciate a customer with a legitimate issue actually getting a decent amount of their money back in a speedy manner for once, but I can't help but feel like you could have made them happy with a lot less. Am I the jerk for not putting my boyfriend's name on my house? I recently received a house. My grandmother passed away and left her 2 houses to my sister and I. We sat down and between the 2 of us decided that she should have the bigger house as she's married and has 2 kids and another on the way, while I would move into the smaller 2-bedroom house. My sister's husband has been added to the title of her house as he helped her pay the tax on it. I was able to pay the tax on mine by myself as it was cheaper due to being smaller. Because my boyfriend, 3 years, didn't contribute financially towards it, I didn't think to put him on the title. We had a housewarming party last weekend, and his parents came up towards me towards the end of the night and were going on about how lucky the boyfriend and I were to be able to live somewhere like this rent-free, and it gives us such a head start in life. And they were very appreciative that I'd given half the house to my boyfriend. I corrected them that I hadn't and he wasn't on the title, but was welcome to live with me and not pay rent so that he had more money to put towards his studies. We were both master's students. They immediately became very judgmental, saying that I was being unfair not putting his name on the title, and that clearly I didn't expect the relationship to last, and I didn't trust him, among other things. I said they were being unfair, and he wasn't entitled to half my family's house, and then I walked away from them. Now numerous members of his family have messaged me, and him, saying that I'm a B-word and I don't trust him, and telling him to watch out because I clearly don't love him. I really thought what I did was normal, but with so many people telling me I'm in the wrong for not doing that, it's starting to mess with my head. I've gotten a bunch of messages asking what my boyfriend thinks, so I'll put my response here. I brought it up with him on Monday, and he said he feels like it's a sign that I don't trust him. I said that I wouldn't add a man to the title unless we were married, and he was paying for half of the rates. He said that it feels like I'm blackmailing him into getting married. I said I wasn't. I just wouldn't want to make a huge commitment like giving him half my house without some commitment from him. And he said to just drop it because we're never going to agree, so let's just leave it so we don't argue. Am I the jerk here? Nope, you are not in the wrong here in the narrator's books at least. If I was living with a partner who let me live in their place rent-free, then I would be happy as a clam. Pushing to get 50% of the property that my partner inherited feels pretty greedy to me, even if it was a relationship of a few years. Longer than that, and if you're contributing financially, maybe you can reasonably have a conversation. Honestly, it sounds like the in-laws are putting forward a weird united agenda to put your boyfriend on the property ladder early. It all feels like some kind of weird medieval political marriage to marry into higher means. And the fact that they all took up a messaging campaign against you is pretty shady. You don't have to like it, people, but this all feels so weirdly calculated. The boyfriend sounds less awful but still kinda bad. This would probably color future interactions poorly if it were me. Maybe chuck him back into his old flat and see how he likes paying the bills. Buyer wins my auction but won't pay. So I make fake accounts to win all his auctions without paying. I make art as a hobby. Metal sculptures, to be precise. I only sell them when I need a bit of money for something. I had a holiday coming up, so I listed one here on TradeMe, an auction site, for $1 reserve. The auction lasted 10 days, and the piece got quite a bit of interest in that time, with lots of people adding it to their watch list and bidding on it. It ended up selling for a bit over $500. Perfect! I contacted the winner with my bank details and asked for their delivery address. No reply. I email them again, nothing. I look into his profile a bit, and sure enough, he doesn't follow through on half the things he buys. A fair few grumpy feedbacks from other sellers. He's a complete time waster. I'm a bit annoyed. I've already had to pay a listing fee, advertising fees, and a $40 success fee. I'll eventually get this back, but it's still annoying. Being in the limbo on a deal kinda sucks. You expect the money and kind of don't at the same time. It got me raging. I Google his email, nothing. I check if he has any listings for sale, and he doesn't at the moment. Besides giving him bad feedback, there's really not much else I can do right now. I add him as a favorite seller. This way, the next time he lists something, I'll get emailed about it, but he never does. About a year later, after I'd forgotten about all of it, I got a bunch of emails from TradeMe telling me that the Time Waster has new listings. Seems Time Waster is packing up shop and moving to Australia. Seems everything has got to go, mate. Ironically, his listing states that everything must be picked up by the end of August as, "I'm moving to Australia. No time wasters." He's got listings for a car, motorcycle, tools, a welder, some furniture, rims, and a bunch of other stuff. I give his feedback another quick look to see if he's changed his ways lately. He hasn't. Over the following week, I research what a good price would be for everything on the lists. I share all of his listings with my friends and get them to add his listings to their watch list so he thinks they're popular. I instruct them to go into a bidding war with me on each item up to a certain amount, but no further. I win all of his auctions using a bunch of false accounts. Lucky guy gets top dollar for everything. I reply to all the auction-winning email confirmations from the various accounts, arranging different pickup times for the goods, agreeing to paying cash on pickup for everything. As the weeks go on, I cancel, reschedule, rain check, and delay every pickup. Bearing in mind, I'm pretending to be a different person for each item from different SIM cards. On the day I'd arranged to pick up the car, it had been agreed to previously that he could continue to use his car up until 2 days before leaving for Australia. Because I'm a nice guy like that, I text him that I'm on my way, see you at 1. I was late, of course. Nearly there, mate, see you soon. Half an hour later, 5 minutes away. 20 minutes later, I'm here, where are ya? I ignored the text messages and waited for the call. The time waster calls me, where are ya? So I say, annoying, isn't it? What? Annoying, isn't it? What do you mean? You know, having someone bid on your auction with no intention of buying it. Are you freaking kidding me? No, I remember being quite annoyed when you did that to me. Who? When? I'll let you figure that one out. Bye. I hang up. Over the next few hours, I called him as the welder buyer. Annoying, isn't it? The motorbike buyer. Annoying, isn't it? Outdoor furniture buyer. Annoying, isn't it? All of them. To top it off, I gave him positive feedback on everything I bought, saying he was a top trader, A++. Easy pickup, good communication. In the coming weeks, I was contacted by TradeMe regarding his dispute. He was wanting to get the success fees back, over $500 altogether, I'd guess. So I responded to each of those with the fact that I'd already paid and picked it up, and was happy with the item. Not sure if he got all those success fees back, but I very much doubt it. In short, someone won my auction and didn't pay, so I won all of their auctions and didn't pay either. Am I the jerk? Holy crud, you went scorched earth on this guy. Now, on the one hand, this guy was clearly a serial waster of other people's time with very little consideration for the many that he's inconvenienced. On the other hand, you went berserk on screwing up this guy's life in some pretty major and costly ways. Well, one hopes that he learned his lesson from the whole ordeal. Sounds like you probably could have done with the money on the auction that he shorted you for, so we maybe call it an eye for an eye and half of his face as well. $500 dues and success fees is no joke to anyone on an average income. I'll say that I hope he was eventually able to sort his affairs out after all this. Hopefully a relative in Kiwi land was able to at least hold the stuff for him until he relisted and managed to get some sort of non-joke customers. And hopefully by now, TradeMe, the service they use there, has updated their service with some more features to protect their various buyers and consumers. Because if the author were to try and pull this on eBay, you'd at least be looking at a string of investigations and going through some minor inconveniences for your trouble. It was probably a good thing that the list of people he'd wronged sounds like it was so massive, because this guy might have been motivated to drive over and give you a piece of his mind. He won't be able to figure it out, so let's call the author a jerk vigilante and move on. Are you even old enough to work here? This happened many years ago, nearly 9 now. I used to work at a multi-million-dollar sporting goods store. I'd been there for 2 years and was acting assistant manager, which makes it even funnier. This happened on a Saturday during one of our busiest sporting seasons. I'm assisting a customer and we don't have the item in store, but we can special order it for them. This process does take a few minutes, but I can use their coupons, unlike if they ordered it at home. So they agree. Of course, since it's busy, our internet is really taking a hit and it's going a little slower than usual. So we strike up a conversation. We're talking about their kids and how they're doing in school when the topic turns to me. For reference, the wife was standing with us, the husband and I, but she wasn't talking to us, she was focusing on her kids. The husband says, "What year are you in school?" "Oh, I'm a sophomore." He looks shocked. "Don't you have to be 18 to work here?" I was confused as I was multitasking and hadn't picked up what they were putting down yet. Yes? Well, how the hell are you working here then? Are they breaking labor laws? You're only 16 and they have you running around on a Saturday? You should be out being a kid." I had a sudden realization at this. Oh yeah, I'm a sophomore in college. The customer is just staring at me, so I tried to break it down for them. I'm 21, 2-1, born in the 90s. I've been working here for 2 years. They were so shocked, they just stayed silent for the rest of the transaction, which thankfully was only a few seconds longer. I sent them off with a cheery, "Have a good day. Let us know if you need any more assistance." As they were walking away, and I heard the wife yelling at the husband for assuming my age and how disrespectful it was, with the husband trying to recover and spouting out, "Well, you thought she was young too." which, as I assume, did not go over well for him. Look, I don't like to go to bat for a big corporate chain, but why would that kind of brand, of all places, risk being caught out breaking labor laws? Feels like they have everything to lose from that. I do sympathize with the curse of the babyface, however. I've been in grown adult office jobs being subtly probed about whether I'm actually old enough to be there as well, and it never gets any less annoying. Like, my boss just told you that I'm one of the main database coordinators. Why do you assume that he plucked me out of middle school to do that? The office isn't that hard up on funds that they went from slight layoffs to child labor at the drop of a hat. To be honest, the narrator didn't know that any labor laws would prohibit an actual kid from working on a Saturday. I worked fast food and paper rounds during school in the mid-2000s, and as far as I know, that was all completely above board and legal. Is this an America thing, or is the parent just kind of ignorant? If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. You were never my dad. Back in the mid-90s, my sister got knocked up by a guy. She was 17 and he was 18. I despised the guy with pretty much every fiber of my being. My mum decided, however, that a baby should know their father, so she invited him to come live in our house without telling me. Took me a week to calm down enough so that when I eventually came back, I didn't punch him when I walked in the door. John was a piece of crap. Great artistic talent, but all he did all day was sit out in the garage and do prison tats for people, in addition to stealing mine and my deceased father's power tools and pawning them for a few bucks so he could get some cigarettes. I worked a full-time job and went to school, so I'd be gone for 12 to 14 hours a day, but it felt like I was pulling into the driveway of a frat house, with a dozen or so people drinking and partying in the garage, until I had to leave in the morning. I slowly curtailed that crap by being a giant pain in the butt to all the guests, by having their cars towed or their wheels inexplicably slashed. By the time my nephew was 2, I'd managed to put a stop to the 24-hour party zone, but people would still congregate on Saturdays. A few months later, I'd had enough and threw John to the curb. My sister's friends all came forward to tell her about how he'd hit on all of them, and probably slept with half of them, plus some other loose women he'd meet, all the while professing his devotion to my sister and their child. After I'd thrown him out, John disappeared for 8 years, no idea where, and I didn't really care. Then came a court summons for a custody hearing. John was suing for custody? However, in the 8 years since he'd disappeared, my sister had met a guy and they'd gotten married. My nephew was formally adopted by his stepdad and changed his legal name. The first hearing was dismissed because the allegations made as the basis for the custody hearing were investigated by CPS and decided as having no substance, in fact. The nephew wasn't beaten, mistreated, or neglected. The house wasn't a disaster or in danger of falling apart, nor was it a health threat. Every few months, John would file another custody hearing request until it finally got a date. John made a number of allegations, all of which were disproven by documentation and fact. Finally, the judge decided he'd had enough and called my 10-year-old nephew up and asked him who he wanted to live with. I don't know him. He walked out of my life when he was 2. He's not my dad. My stepdad is my dad, and John will never be my dad, and I don't want to ever see him again. The judge ruled against John and dismissed his custody request with prejudice. When I looked at John, he was sobbing in his chair as his mother comforted him. I sneered at him and flipped him off as I walked out of the courtroom. As to why John was missing for 8 years, apparently he'd been committed to a mental facility in Tennessee, and when he got out years later, he went on SSI disability and then plotted various ways to hurt me, my sister, and my mum once he got out. He'd called CPS on us, made a number of anonymous complaints about substances and weapons, and even called the fire department a time or two. The custody hearing was meant to be the culminating event. But fortunately, John was an idiot and we'd had enough money to hire a good attorney. A few years later, John tried to mend some fences with my nephew and invited him to come down to where he lived and meet his relatives, including a half-brother my nephew didn't even know that he'd had. But her mother deliberately excluded John from the birth certificate. This is in addition to the half-brother and sister he has from his mum and adoptive father. Needless to say, my nephew was not terribly impressed by his relatives. Now, my nephew and brother-in-law are some serious rednecks, and they both love weapons, hunting, camping out, and generally living the redneck lifestyle, but apparently John and his family took it to some serious extremes. There's a photo I saw one time on the internet with some guy sitting on a toilet on his front porch. And I imagine John and his extended family lived something like that. Only seriously and not done as an internet joke. Considering the area, I wouldn't be surprised. So anyway, when my nephew was 15, almost 16, we received a call that John was dead. Someone had put a shotty to the back of his head and blown his brains out as he sat on the couch in his mobile home. I felt sorry for John's girlfriend and her son, who found him, but for John, I didn't feel a thing. A journalist tracked my nephew down a few months later and filled us in on some details. Apparently, John had been killed as a result of a murder-for-hire plot. We learned through our own sources that John had been dealing substances and unknowingly moved into someone else's territory. The would-be kingpin paid a guy a few $100 and the promise of an ATV to kill John. Typical redneck retribution, I guess. The journalist asked my nephew for a quote. "Sure, I wish I could meet the man who killed him." "Why is that?" the journalist asked. "So I could shake his hand. John was never my dad and I won't miss him." Cripes, well, those are some strong feelings there, and it doesn't sound like John was an awfully considerate spouse or parent. Honestly, there's a special kind of messed up that you have to be to try and take custody of a kid purely to upset the other parent, and it's clear that aside from just being kind of a jerk, John was also pretty mentally unwell. The substance use didn't help. I couldn't help but chuckle at some of the extreme redneckness on display here, though. Taking a man's life, with all the horror that entails, in return for a couple of $100 and an ATV, sounds like something straight out of the darkest version of the show Letterkenny that a man can envision. If we rule out the unfortunate fact of his death, it seems like everyone on the author's side was left better off by John's absence. Also, your nephew is savage. I know a lot of kids with a estranged family have very complicated feelings and can be prone to be too forgiving, no matter how much of a bad influence the missing parent was. So it either speaks volumes of how bad a job John did or how well his stepdad was doing. John aside, it's good that your sister was able to move on to a more wholesome family environment. Some people have types, but thank goodness that she was able to learn from the mistakes of her first choice and go for a completely different kind of guy on round 2. Oh, you must know the owner so well. I work as a cashier at a locally owned and run grocery store. It's owned by a family that many people know and try to use to their advantage. The other day, I was checking out a woman who was buying quite a few flowers. She goes to tell me that she's a florist and blah 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 and asks if we have a florist on staff right now. She asks this right as the owner Blake was walking by. So I get his attention and ask if we have a florist on staff. And he tells her, no, we don't at the moment, and walks away to do whatever he was going to do. Y'all don't have a florist then? I say, no, we used to, but she retired a little while ago. Okay, that's cool. I should definitely submit my resume to Blake. We're old friends, you know. Is he here today? Yes'm, he's here today, actually. Never mind, I'll talk to him when I bring it in. Oh, well, I can give you an application if you'd like, ma'am. No. The resume is only a formality. I'm sure I'll get this job. Blake owes me a favor anyway. Him and his wife Jen. And she leaves. I later asked Blake if he had any idea who that lady was, and he said no. So I told him the story, which he found very comical. Especially the fact that his wife's name is Kate. I don't know who the frick Jen is, but he was right there. Really, lady? This isn't the first time that people have tried to get what they want by dropping names, even fake ones. So I've read a few different accounts of people trying to name drop or bluff their way into getting free stuff from stores and restaurants before, but this might be the first case of someone trying to fake it until they make it into an actual paying job this way. What was this woman's long-term plan when she actually met Blake? Try to gaslight him into thinking that they'd actually been friends for years? Go and Photoshop and fabricate a long, vibrant history of travel and parties together? Perhaps a former relationship? Either this is one of the boldest applicants for a position that I've ever seen, or she was utterly pants-on-head insane. Maybe a bit of both. Was there a chance this might have worked if Blake hadn't in fact been standing right there in her field of view without her recognizing him? Because that's the only real actual proof the author had in this story. If Blake hadn't been there in the store, this lady might have at least got an interview on her gall alone. Sure thing, boss. I'll follow the GPS. I drive a concrete truck. We deliver ready-mix concrete throughout a fairly large area. Keep in mind, concrete has a shelf life of 90 minutes once water mixes with the cement. This is very important on spec jobs. Our company uses a routing and tracking system I will call the terrible system. If there is a good route or less than good route, it chooses the worst route of all routes possible. After working with it a short time, this was noted. During training, new drivers are told to use it for the final part of the route only. The problem is, every time one doesn't follow the route, an alert is sent to management. Early into using terrible system, the old managers found a way to turn off these alerts. Then a new manager starts. After a year, he brings up in meetings that drivers aren't following the terrible system's routing. Multiple times we tell him it gives us the worst and longest routes, but he doesn't listen. After 6 months, he states that drivers will be written up if we continue to not follow terrible system's routing. Drivers don't listen to him. A few days after his announcement, a fellow driver is written up. This is talked about. Cue malicious compliance. The next day on my second load, I have a load to a location that I've had before. It's 15 miles to the east of the plant and then a 10 miles leg north. Following that route takes about 45 minutes or less. We had been going to this job site for 3 months by this time, and we knew terrible system gave a much longer route. I was the first truck of 4 and noted on the radio we needed to follow terrible system route as directed. So off I go. The route it takes me on is southeast 13 miles. North on Interstate Highway 35 miles including a chicken coop, weigh station for non-truck drivers, trucks are chronically overweight for interstate, east through a large metro area for 20 miles followed by last leg south of about 15 miles. Takes 125 minutes for me. The terrible system gave an estimated travel time of 140 minutes, so I actually did pretty well. I arrive and I'm timed out. The concrete is ruined. Rejected, and that cost the company $1,000 for the concrete, not to mention 20 gallons of fuel that I burned. Second and third truck are the same. Fourth truck was stopped at chicken coop, and company had a $500 fine. The customer is furious, calls manager screaming. The manager asks to talk to me, and I tell him we followed the terrible system routing as directed, and he can check that easily. The next day in the break room, a sign is posted stating that drivers are to use professional discretion in choosing the best and most expeditious routes for jobs. And there you go, a manager with no actual experience in the matter, dictating that his employees follow a system so that he can be seen having an influence on day-to-day affairs, before swiftly figuring out that there was a reason why everyone stuck to their old system in the first place. Decision costs the company thousands of dollars when people listen to it, so it's time to backpedal, backpedal, backpedal. Laying several $1,000s in wasted money at these people's feet really is the only way to get through to some of them sometimes. Also, observe that he wasn't able to announce his latest policy change to the team's face, either in a meeting or through an email. He had to go on a sign posted overnight in the break room while no one was looking. It's hilarious. I think I have an actual good idea for him, though. One would think that maybe he was able to show some effectiveness to his higher-ups by slashing the cost of the terrible routing system from the budget and calling it a day. Everyone wins that way. Coworker steals my lunch, so I put ghost peppers in my food. So I like to bring my own food into the office, and we have a fridge to put things into, and I have food tubs with my name on them. A coworker would sometimes, quote, not see people's names on food and think it was theirs, so they'd heat it up and eat it and then apologize after the fact. They did this enough for it to be an annoyance to their coworkers, but not enough for our employers to really care. This has been happening with my food for once or twice a month. Last month I'd had enough, and I like spicy food, but I don't bring it into the office, as sometimes I'll let people try some of my food and my cooking. I ordered a bag of ghost chili peppers and put the full bag into a big pot of chili that would last for several days. I took this into the office and had it for lunch every day. Midweek, my lunch went missing, and I was waiting for the person who was stealing my lunch to get a shock when they ate it. What happened in reality was someone got sent home sick, and the next day they were off, and I was told that they went to the doctors for stomach pains. 2 weeks went by, and the coworker who was off refused to talk about it and said HR was involved, so I knew they were going to try and get me fired. I went home and ordered another bag of ghost chilies and made another batch of my chili, this time with only one of the chilies in a single tub. I put this in the freezer, and the following Monday I was told I had an HR meeting that day. I refused and said they needed to give me 24 hours to find someone to come into the meeting with me, and the next day I had my manager come into the meeting and I brought in my now heated ghost chili infused chili. The long and short is, I was told I could be fired for trying to poison the person who was stealing my lunch, and I asked if they admitted to stealing people's lunches, which they did. I then said I have a batch of the chili in question with me and I like spicy food. My liking spicy food shouldn't stop me from having it at work since it doesn't smell when heated like fish does, and my manager agreed it was on the person who took my lunch without knowing how spicy it was, and I shouldn't be held liable if they eat something of someone else's that doesn't agree with them. My manager and I then ate some of the chili and offered it to the people in the meeting, some of whom tried it and agreed that while it was spicy, it was clearly what I liked as I was fine eating it. The meeting ended and nothing happened. I wasn't taken into another meeting and my lunch wasn't taken anymore. But the person who'd stolen our lunch got a slap on the wrist and was allowed to stay at work. Lunches started to go missing again, so my manager went to HR to say that lunches were going missing and he knew who was taking it and had proof this time. When they asked for the proof, he presented the meeting record with the line highlighted where they admitted they'd stolen lunch and the line where HR had said this was not what the meeting was about. The culprit was fired the next day for theft of property and told they wouldn't be given a reference. In short, a coworker was eating other people's lunches, so I, quote, poisoned them and got fired. Am I the jerk? I've never had a coworker do this, but it seems like a guaranteed way to put a target on your back if people ever realize that you're the culprit. As much of a petty crime as it is, I don't see anyone being able to keep doing this with impunity unless it was the frickin' boss or something, as the collective inconvenience of multiple people having to go out and pay for takeaway would actually add up to quite a sum of money after a while. So I can absolutely see that when all the thefts are added up, the person in question should be kicked out the door. They're costing the collective workplace hundreds of bucks. So no, you're definitely not the jerk here. Also, as a lover of spicy food, I don't think I've ever had a ghost pepper. If just one of those things was enough to make the entire batch of chili spicy for your little meeting, I can't imagine what the whole bag was doing to the person's tummy first time round. Also, what a moron to own up to it like that to try and get the victim of their theft fired. Good riddance. At that point, you've got to take the L and quietly just stop stealing from that particular person. Don't want to get your animals out of my apartment? Pay $1,500. I used to live with 3 other guys. One of them had a girlfriend over all the time. She cleaned and bought stuff, so it was cool for a while. Then she asked us if she could pet sit 2 newborn kittens for a week while her parents were out of town. I knew I was allergic to dogs, but I didn't know that I was deathly allergic to cats. The cats get there, and after a day, I'm an allergic mess. However, I agreed to them staying. There's not much she can do with them, so I put up with it for a week. A week goes by and the cats should be gone. I get home and they're still there. The girlfriend says, "Oh, they're going to stay for another week." On top of that, the girlfriend's boyfriend, my roommate, his mum has fallen and hurt her neck pretty bad and is in the hospital. So he's now watching his dog at our apartment. So I try to keep cool. "Girl, the cats have got to go. Sorry, the week is up. You can't just keep them here. I told you I'm allergic and you don't pay rent, so you have to get them out." As for my roommate, I told him that I'm sorry about his mum, but I can't keep living with animals I'm allergic to. No one asked me if the dog could come, and no one asked me if the cats could stay longer. I suggest maybe they keep the animals at his girlfriend's apartment, who lives a whole mile away. "You are so ridiculous. You're crazy. My mum is in the hospital and you care about my dog being here?" says my roommate. Then the girlfriend pitches in. "I can't just bring these animals to my apartment. I have roommates." Gee, girl, what are we? I storm out of the apartment and immediately head to the leasing office. I told them that we have 3 animals in our apartment and that we haven't paid the pet fee, $500 per animal. I asked them to come by later, and I make up an excuse that the animals are being too loud, neighbors are complaining, and that we didn't pay our pet deposit. The next day I come home from class and the girlfriend is crying on the couch. "The leasing office came by and said we have to get rid of the animals due to complaints." "Oh, no," I responded. Luckily, they got a warning about the pets and didn't have to pay the $1,500. I suck at confrontation, so I love when other people can take the reins for me. Am I the jerk? Nope, you gave them all the outs, as well as a very valid reason as to why they had to get them out of there. It's on them to sort their crap out, not you. Also, I totally resonate with coming home after a long day, feeling good about the fact that your flatmate will have finally done or got rid of that thing they were going to do, only to see that there's been zero progress at all. It may well be one of the biggest mood killers there is. But yes, it could have been worse for them. They didn't need to pay the ungodly amount of money that they should have by rights had to pay anyway for having them in the apartment. Also, what's with the girlfriend's excuse? I can't take them home, I have flatmates? Oh, but you don't give a crap about the flatmates of your partner, right? Bizarre disconnect on her behalf. You're definitely winning for finding ways to get them out of there without even incriminating yourself. Well done. Am I the jerk for letting my mother and sister-in-law find my hubby and mine's bedroom toys because I suspected they snooped in my drawers? My husband and I have been dating for 6 years and married for 4. We have a 3-year-old baby boy, and since we don't plan on having more children, I told my husband that I wanted to get my chest redone because I wanted them more perky, so I had surgery last year. My mother-in-law has always been sniffy because my husband is her only son. We've gone low contact over the years because she's overbearing with him and dismissing with me. Things got a little better when our baby was born, but after my surgery? Oof. It's like I wrote on my forehead, "Look at my chest. I want to cheat on my husband." She's always implying that I did it for male validation. Yeah, your sons, for frick's sake. She'll say that I'll leave my husband, that I look like a working girl because I wear stuff that shows them off, and that I could have gotten them a little smaller, everything. She also complains about my clothes and undies a lot because no married woman with a child should dress like this. And see, that's what stung me because how would she know? I suspected she was going into my drawers, but my husband told me that she could never. Then she made a comment about a cute set of lingerie that shows basically everything, and I was confused. I asked how she'd know that I have it, and she said she saw it in the washing machine. But I prefer to wash my sets by hand so that the lace lasts longer. Anyways, we've recently changed our bedroom, and I had an idea to put an end to this when I was restocking my drawers. I used one in my vanity to put all of my husband's and my adult toys, a few sets, and a dirty letter that he wrote to me once. My mother-in-law visited us a few times and said nothing, so I did feel bad for accusing her. But yesterday she was here with my sister-in-law, and my husband and I were in the kitchen cooking for them. We heard my mother-in-law calling us, and when we went to our room, they were standing next to my open drawer. I just snorted, looked at my husband and said, "See? She snoops." My husband got red in the face, berated my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, and they both left after calling me indecent. My husband is mad at them, but he's mad at me too because he says I shouldn't have set up a trap for his family, and is saying we 3 need to apologize to each other, so maybe I am the jerk. They called you into your own private boudoir to have a go at you about your own private married bedroom life? I mean, this isn't like leaving them in the open or a kitchen drawer for her to accidentally find. The mother would have to be blatantly snooping and going through your stuff to have any chance of finding these things. I don't think the husband has much to be angry about. He already knew his mum was way too much if he'd decided to go low contact with her before, and there was me thinking that at least people like this would stop shaming women for their private bedroom stuff once said women were married and kept it behind closed doors. Nope. Apparently you can do consenting things exclusively for your partner in matrimony and still have awful people who have no business giving their opinions screaming at you. Get effed. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. To sleep, perchance to dream. I was reminded about this last night while going through some old photos with the wife. For the first few years after we graduated, the wife and I lived in an apartment. Nice place, but of course the walls were paper thin. Life was good until we got new neighbors. A pair of guys who'd play their stereo super loud until 2 or 3 a.m. during the week. It kept us and other neighbors awake and miserable. They mainly did it on weeknights because they would work and be gone from the apartment almost every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Life became really crappy. Their speakers were up against the common wall to our bedroom, which made it completely impossible to sleep. And other neighbors tried talking with them, going to the complex's management, and even calling the cops. Never got more than a few days' respite, and then they were right back at it. They were also complete jerks in other ways, parking in other people's reserved spots. Basically, jerks. It got to the point where it was affecting my job performance. I worked at a big defense systems company as an engineer and had several electronical engineer friends. One of them made me what he called an interference box. It was basically an amplifier with a variable power output that I could put near the common wall that would cause massive distortion and noise to come out of any speakers within a 10 to 20 foot radius. Made it impossible to use their system. It got to where I'd just turn it on around 10 p.m. and leave it on all night. It made a bit of a buzzing noise itself, but not bad. I'd just cover it with a couple of pillows and I could sleep. If I turned it all the way, it would also mess with theirs and my TV. These guys tried all kinds of things to fix their stereo. They bought new and bigger speakers, line filters, among other things. Nothing worked. I'd hear them complaining about the situation and grinding each other's gears over who had broken the sound system. They eventually got the apartment complex's maintenance people involved, but that didn't help either. Life was good again. One day they packed up and moved out, skipping out on their lease. They were not missed. The new neighbors were quieter than us. Stayed in the apartment until we bought our first house 6 months later. I think everyone who's ever lived in a low-income block of apartments is feeling a sort of vicarious joy at what you accomplished here, author. I love that what you did was enough to make them spend hundreds, if not thousands, in new equipment and unretrieved lease. I do wonder whether your sound-killing machine worked in a direction or a radius, though, because you potentially stopped a whole bunch of people from being able to watch TV, depending on how powerful that thing is. A few more evil commenters suggested using a powerful electromagnet in the direction of the speaker to actually destroy their radios. That probably comes closer to vandalism, but who knows? If they continually disrespect everyone else's need for sleep, maybe it would have been an acceptable measure in everyone else's eyes after long enough. Everyone, please note that this channel does not condone using these devices to disrupt the lives and destroy the property of your neighbors. Are we covered? We're covered for liability now? Great. I think we're covered. Okay then, on to the next story about disrespecting military personnel. You're a naval officer and we'll show you the respect you deserve? Yes, sir. Hello, folks. A while back I was stationed in Pensacola, Florida as a trainee for learning to be an IT for the Navy. Every morning our class would meet at the end of a long stretch of walkways where we'd march as a unit down to our classrooms building. Now, this base is primarily manned by enlisted personnel. For the uninitiated, we are the lower-ranking personnel, and when we encounter an officer, we're required to render a hand salute. Most officers that set foot on this base know that they're outnumbered 1,000 to 1, and as such tend to avoid the enlisted mob so as to not draw unwanted attention, as massive herds of people are forced to stop what they're doing, render a salute and a greeting, and you have to do the same. Cue our brand new lieutenant. For naming anonymity, and because I like Forrest Gump, I'll change his name to Lieutenant Dan. Lieutenant Dan was a piece of crap, and would regularly park his car near where we were forming up, stroll by our formation, and cuss out any of the new folks who didn't notice him. One time, his exact words were, "I am a naval officer and you will show me the respect I deserve by rendering a hand salute." I swear to God, it was like he rehearsed his spiel in the morning before showing up for work. What Lieutenant Dan didn't know is that us lowly enlisted folks are petty. What he also didn't know is that sometimes on rare days, where it was too hot in North Florida to safely march in formation, we would all be allowed to walk ourselves home down the long half-mile stretch. Well, one summer day, with maximum humidity and heat so hot you could fry an egg on concrete, we were all allowed to walk ourselves back to the barracks. As we were walking in the distance, my class sees the all-too-familiar stride of Lieutenant Dan coming our way. A plan is hatched as we begin spacing ourselves out several meters apart and marching one by one down towards him. I was one of the middle-of-the-pack folks, and I got to see the look on his face as the first salute and polite good afternoon was rendered, followed by another as soon as his arm went down, then another, and then another. By the time he got to me, he was sweating. He even shouted at us, "You don't need to salute." Try as he might, though, our class decided that all 20-plus students in my class, and a few others nearby, would render him his proper salute during the sweltering half-mile walk down the path. I can't confirm this or not, but apparently he was pretty angry at the end and cussing everyone out pretty loudly. His uniform was all stained from sweat. All I know is that from that moment on, when we saw him park his car, he'd get out, look at our class, and walk well around us out of hand salute range. You've got to love the military. In short, officer asked for a salute, and 20 or more of us complied in the Florida sun. One by one. Well, I for one am just glad that Lieutenant Dan could finally afford to get his legs back after that whole bubblegum shrimp business. Okay, so at first I thought that maybe he was just a stickler for the rules and doing it to assist in training the new recruits. But it actually does sound like this guy just reveled in having people who were forced to salute him. The best part is that he almost certainly couldn't complain about this to anyone. Troops have to salute their superiors, and the only things you can really do to complain about someone in the army is to report when someone commits an offense in gross violation of the rules, none of which these guys were doing. So the poor jerk has to just slink by everyone for the rest of his time at the base and live with the fact that they're almost certainly just snickering at him behind his back. Fitting revenge, well done, author. I'm not allowed to take Ubers unless it's to the main airport? Fine. This happened years ago. In Toronto, there's a small island airport close to downtown, and then the full-on Pearson International Airport. Once every 2 weeks or so, I'd have to travel, so I'd usually book my flight through the island airport since it would be cheaper and my office was downtown, so it took literally 15 minutes to get to. And there's no real customs or anything, so you can show up 30 minutes before your flight departs and be good to go. If my flight was at 1 p.m., I'd leave the office at noon and make it with time to spare. One day, I got my expense request denied for the Uber that took me to the airport because it was, quote, close enough to walk and as per company policy, taxi and Uber is only for Pearson. All of this fuss over a $12 expense which I'd been doing for months. Okay, fine. The next flight I booked in Pearson, the ticket was $900 instead of $400, and I paid $70 in an Uber to get there instead of $12. And I had to leave work a full 3.5 hours before my flight to make through check-in, security, to get to my gate in time. Usually I'd be on some sort of call leading up to my flight, but here I couldn't do any work at all. Sorry team, I'm unavailable for the rest of the day because of company policy. Come back and I'm asked why my expense report was double the usual amount I'd put in. It's because I can't expense a $12 Uber to Billy Bishop Airport, and I'm not going to walk for 40 minutes in my suit and dress shoes in the middle of January in the snow. 2 months later, and it's now cost them $2,000 over what I'd usually have spent, and some of the flights in that time were over $1,000 versus the $400 at the island airport. Finally, I get an email one day saying that I can take whichever flights I deem best based on my judgment, and that any amount under $700 is auto-approved at the island airport. Now I get to eat a nice meal and sometimes upgrade myself to premium seats and still fall within the budget. Classic travel department compliance story. These seem to happen so often and they never actually seem to listen to reason or words, so I can't even really think that the author took his revenge too far. He offered them tangible, demonstrable consequences as to their policy and forced them to notice. And even with this going on, it took them months to getting around to offering an alternative. Actually, I kind of envy him because he came out a little better off than before, as he seems to be using the extra legroom in the budget to offer himself sweet perks. So following company policy to the letter did net him a gain, just not in the way that we'd usually expect. Although I can't imagine being a valuable enough employee that I can waste $2,000 of company money and not at least get the chewing out of a lifetime, even if they do change the policy. It's nice to be you, author, I guess. I caught a lady stealing, and she threw 2-liter soda bottles at my head for calling her out. I work at a service station, a petrol garage, usually doing a pretty wide range of shift times. The store isn't located in a bad area, but we still get more than our fair share of customers who might need reminding that they actually have to, pay for things before attempting to leave. We're told by managers that we should remind them of such, but if they get confrontational or insist on leaving, we're simply to call the cops immediately, pull up the CCTV footage and put that person on the banned from store list. So one fine rainy afternoon, I'm the only one out front. My coworker is in the back arranging fridges and other stock. We're mostly quiet, so I'm doing some paperwork behind the till when in comes Crazy Lady. From the minute Crazy Lady came in, she looked pretty shifty. So of course I'm keeping a discreet eye on her as she meanders through the aisles. I watch as Crazy Lady shoves a whole range of items up into her jumper before she comes up to the till. The only thing she places down to pay for is an ice cream, and she asks for smokes. As is procedure, I go through with the transaction and wait until Crazy Lady turns to leave the store, making her intention to steal clear. So I say, "Excuse me, ma'am, you'll either need to return the items you've stashed in your jumper or you'll need to pay for them." Crazy Lady immediately starts yelling, "What items? I've not got any." "Ma'am, this store is under video surveillance. I witnessed you place the items in your jumper. If you won't return or pay for them, then I'll have to call the police." At this point, Crazy Lady starts hurling slurs, cussing, and generally being an upstanding citizen. She proceeds to open up her jacket, releasing everything she's taken to fall to the floor, and makes a point of stomping on the items like a behaviorally challenged 3-year-old. I was eager to de-escalate considering how she's responded so far. "Thank you, ma'am. Please feel free to go." And this sets her off even worse. She throws the ice cream she had just bought at me, although it's still in the wrapper. While I'm standing there trying to process the fact that I've just been hit in the chest by frozen dessert, the Crazy Lady is going for the shelf filled with 2-liter bottles of soft drink that's set up next to the door. And then she begins hurling those at me. Luckily, I'm able to duck into a nearby aisle. Kind of panicking at this point because me being a small female against a clearly deranged customer are not great odds. That, and if I did decide to defend myself via violence, I'd no doubt be fired. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, I heard the bell above the door go off. A loud slapping noise, and the Crazy Lady starts screeching, like someone had simultaneously just killed her newborn child and shoved a hot iron under her fingernails. I decide to risk taking a peek to see what set her off. Thankfully, it's the police. 2 officers are pinning this woman to the ground and are handcuffing her despite Crazy Lady's best impression of a fish-out-of-water banshee hybrid. My coworker had apparently heard the commotion and called the cops. Luck was on our side in that a patrol car was only a street over. With Crazy Lady struggling the entire way, they managed to cuff her and get her into their car. When asked, I did indeed agree to have charges pressed, because honestly, if someone is just going to go that psychotic with that little provocation, they probably either need help or just straight up to not be on the street. Yeah. All was clearly not well with this lady, and if she were let off, I'm pretty certain she'd be back or doing it in another place pretty soon. At least this way she might be put in a position to either come clean from a substance she was taking, or maybe receive treatment when people had examined her behavior for a bit. It's all a pretty raw deal for her, but honestly, I don't know what else you're meant to do with a situation like that. She was clearly willing to go into fight mode rather than just flee the store with the items in her jumper. And if someone's going to do that when they're called out, they're pretty dangerous. The author did everything right, did as much as they could to prevent theft without resorting to violence or endangering themselves, so good job there. And good on the nameless coworker for calling the cops. If you make me solve the problem, it'll cost you money. This happened a while back, actually before YouTube was even thought of and no one had their own portable phone. A local business, auto repair shop, changed their number for some reason, and a few months later, when my family added a second phone line to the house, guess which number we were given? It wasn't that much of a pain since most of the customer base had the new number, but about 6 months later we actually started getting calls for this business several times a day. So I finally asked one of the callers where he got the number from. He told me it's on top of the business's building in 3-foot-high letters. Really? So I drove by that way the next day and sure enough, there it is in big blue letters. I look up the current number when I get home and I give them a call. "Hey, I've noticed that you still have your old number on top of your building, and we've been getting a lot of your calls. Would it be possible for someone to correct the sign or just paint over it?" That's where I get told that it's my problem and they don't have the time to deal with it. Click. Oh, okay. Now I see how it is. So I figure out it won't take long to sort this out. I start taking appointments for them. I tell a lady we're having a special on tires. I can get her a complete set for $75. $200 was the average price. I have a guy that can get it done by 6 p.m. the same day and it'll only cost him $750, which is super cheap by the way. I do this maybe 20 to 30 times over the course of a week or so. The calls become less frequent, and as I drive by the following week, I notice that the sign is now just plain white. I'm pretty sure that all in all I probably cost this guy about 10 grand or so in annoyed customers who showed up thinking they had an appointment and a great deal. Some other people have been giving me flack for this. To be fair, I was 15 at the time and didn't really think far enough ahead considering the customers. I was just fed up with the jerk owner and figured if he had a bunch of annoyed customers on his doorstep, it might get his attention since asking nicely didn't work. Yep, it was kind of a jerk move, but sometimes you don't think about every angle. What do you think on balance? Am I the bigger jerk? Well, yeah, I can see how the punishment here was not proportionate to the crime, and that our teenage author might have gone a bit overboard. The people in the auto shop were surly jerks with a baffling lack of care about their business, but 10 grand and a score of heavily inconvenienced people are a bit of a steep price and a lot of collateral damage. Better just to hang up and probably make these people annoyed enough to call a different shop. It's pretty careless of them just to hand over a chunk of their business fate to a teen who has nothing but time and resentment in their lives. We'll say that this is an everyone is a bit crap situation, with varying degrees of malice and stupidity going on with all the individuals involved. I don't think my neighbor would let her dog make brown on my porch again. Okay, so I've been living in this house for 2 years, and the neighborhood is very quiet and safe, so I don't have anything to complain about, except for the little monster that my neighbor just got. Apparently his designated place to go number 2 is right on my porch, and I wouldn't care if just the owner was a little considerate and cleaned up after her dog finished. When I first started noticing the doo-doo, I cleaned it thinking it was a stray dog or something. But then one day I was on the porch myself, and the little jerk came out of my neighbor's house, saw me, and returned. My neighbor must have noticed that her dog returned too fast, so she went out of her house to check what had scared the dog. And there I was. We made eye contact and I nodded. I had a feeling, so I remained sat in my porch a little longer. And there she was, peeking through the blinds to see if I was gone, to see if her little jerk could release the contents of his bowels yet. After some time, she finally gave up and put a leash on the dog to take him to do it elsewhere. By the way, she didn't carry anything to clean whatever his dog produce was, so yeah, she's a disgusting person. I was angry. Not only was she aware of what the dog was doing, but she was waiting for an opportunity to let him do it again. I wanted to talk with her to see if we could resolve this, but apparently communication wasn't going to work in this case, so I decided I'd scare her a little bit. I was going to ask her politely, but the landlord had already done that a few times, and this woman apparently just brushed it off. My boyfriend got to my house just at the time that my neighbor was unpacking some stuff from her car on the other side of the parking lot, which is divided by a wall. Making sure she was able to listen to me, I started telling my boyfriend that I've seen a dog on my porch several times and that it didn't have a collar, so I believed he must be stray and that I'd decided I should eat the dog, since that was culturally accepted in my country to eat them if they don't have an owner. I then described graphically which method of preparation I should use and what ingredients I needed to add. I said that all I needed was to wait for the dog to appear to lure him into my house and start cooking him. I couldn't see my neighbor's face, but I would have loved to see it. Plus, I don't see her dog around anymore. I mean, I joke about eating my friends' pets all the time, and they hate that. So I can't imagine how it must feel to think that someone is actually considering it. And gosh darn, I hate anyone who wants to have a pet without taking on any of the responsibilities of, having a pet. Isn't it dog ownership 101 that you actually have to take them out and be prepared to pick up their business? The fact that you guys were just watching each other, with her blatantly just hoping that you'd leave so that she could mess up your porch, instead of having to go to the colossal effort of walking her own damn pet, speaks volumes about her fitness as a dog owner. I couldn't find any updates to your story on whether Madame McNo-Decency decided to risk her dog ending up in your crock-pot or not, but I do wonder what country or background you have that you can plausibly claim to eat dogs with it. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Pretending not to speak English after we ask you to move your car off our property? Fine, we'll do it ourselves. Dad just told me this story tonight. Before my parents divorced, we lived in a 3-house neighborhood. Our neighbors to the left of us were friendly and we got along with them well. Our neighbors on the right, however, were different. It was rented out to multiple families, one being an Asian family with 7 cars. This will be relevant later. Always in conflict with them, from 24/7 house parties to trying to break into our cars. The family always caused trouble for whatever reason, dysfunctional and probably in debt with how many cars they had between 4 people. There was a particular tree on our property that my dad always parked his car under. It was obvious and known that this was my dad's spot. One evening, my dad comes home to find the Asian neighbors have parked their car in his spot. A dead car that they didn't use anymore because they probably couldn't afford to fix it. So they decided our property was the best place to leave it to rot. My dad knocked on their door and asked them to move it so he could park, but the gentleman at the door said in a thick accent, "Sorry, no English, no speak English," which was obvious bullcrap. My dad was not amused. He told them, "All right, just move your car or I'll call someone to have it towed." 2 weeks go by and the car is still there. 3 weeks later and they haven't moved the car. My dad gets fed up. They may have 7 cars, but that didn't mean they could park on our property. So he decided to take matters into his own hands. He rented a tow truck and waited for the family to be out of the house. He hooked up the car and drove it out to a random parking lot in the shopping center nearby and left it there. Next day, the neighbor came by. "Hey man, do you know what happened to my car?" Perfect English, not a trace of an accent at all of a sudden. Surprise, surprise. My dad played dumb about it. "I thought you couldn't speak English." "Sorry man, I don't know what happened to your car. If you moved it though, thank you, I appreciate it." Our neighbor couldn't do much because he didn't have any proof that my dad did it. Didn't talk to us or park in our spot ever again. Yeah, honestly, if you're going to blatantly be a bad neighbor and feign complete ignorance of what you're doing wrong, then the people playing the same card back to you is about as good as you can expect. Although the comedic side of my brain is just imagining that the dad is a massive racist and has just talked to 2 completely different people who he isn't able to tell apart. But given that most people are actually better than that, we'll put it down to the neighbors being the jerks. I will say that if this parking space was on your property, as you briefly mention at one point, you could have actually called to have it towed at their expense once you found out that they weren't willing to play ball. Oh well, hope they found it, or it got tracked to whoever was on the license plate. Am I the jerk for telling my fiancée that she's not the breadwinner if she's not footing the bills in front of our family and friends? My fiancée and I moved in together shortly before we got engaged. Before we did, we discussed how we'd split the housework and bills. 50-50 down the middle with some wiggle room for when the other needs help. When we moved, it was into her parents' 2-story garage that they converted into basically an apartment. They offered a low rent, $700 total, and pitched in for the electronics and internet so that we could save money for our own place and wedding. My fiancée earns more than me, and that's cool. I'm proud of her. Before we moved in together, it always seemed like she was living paycheck to paycheck, and I chalked it up to the apartment she had prior, having insane rent. She stuck to the 50-50 arrangement at first concerning bills, but she missed them often, and I had to remind her about it. Then after we got engaged, she was back living paycheck to paycheck, either missing or very late with her part of the rent monthly. The 2 utilities we pay, groceries, late with her car payments. Her parents have talked to me multiple times about rent, and I've covered her missing portion to get us caught up, and then tried talking to her. It always turns into her saying we should just move if her parents are going to hound us. I told her we're lucky it's her parents because anywhere else would have kicked our butts out on the street. On top of that, I pay my own bills, do about 65% of the housework, arrange and pay for most of our dates and vacations, gifts for her, and pay towards our pets. I've suggested a financial coach, but what kicks me is whenever we're around others, she boasts about being the breadwinner since she earns more. Goes on about the stresses of being the main source of income, all the hours she has to work to pay our bills, and I was letting it slide until a few days ago when we were at a get-together. She and her sister started up again about her being the breadwinner. Her sister said something to the effect of her ex-boyfriend had had a hard time being with someone who earned more, and my fiancé went, "Good thing Paul doesn't mind me bringing home the pay." I told her just because she earns more it doesn't make her the breadwinner when she blows it all on herself and I'm paying most of the bills. She's embarrassed now and keeps saying I made her look bad and got her in trouble with her parents because they want to see what she spends her money on each month. but I don't think I did anything wrong. Am I the jerk? Okay, as an update, last night I was ready to just postpone the engagement. As of this morning, after a lot of talking and things coming to light, we're broken up. Thank you everyone for your responses and input, especially those who encouraged looking deeper. As a quick summary, my ex felt that a joint account would impede her financial independence. She insisted we could afford her purchases based off our total incomes. Her parents were under the impression she was also paying off my student loans, my car, my phone, and paying for our vacations. She didn't get evicted from her last apartment, but she was late with her rent often enough that they weren't going to renew her lease, so she didn't suggest us moving to a bigger apartment at her building. The biggest nope I'm out moment was learning the monthly take-home amount she told me was what she earned before wage garnishment kicked in addition to mass debt. She's been doing some online stuff to make up for the money she loses due to that. Yes, I got the ring back. I'm going to take some time for myself and get my crap figured out. And a good thing too, I guess. Look, I do understand that there are a myriad of reasons to get into a relationship with someone besides financial ones, but there does seem to be an inherent lack of responsibility and accountability on her part that's damn dangerous to any future you guys might build together. And the fact that she was claiming, or at least being fine with everyone assuming that she was bankrolling your life, displays a very long-distance relationship with the truth that I'd really want to talk to a person about before I hitched my wagon to them. And the revelation about the true state of her finances after all of that seems to have been a potential nail in the coffin. Does she still earn more than you after all that debt? And how much is there left to pay? This is a field of red flags, and I'm glad the author is taking some time and distance to figure things out. Her complaints are also bogus. If her illusion could be destroyed by the truth, it deserves to be. Entitled mother halts service with her deadly allergy and then orders it for dessert. Alright, my mother has some hypochondriac traits. She'll have a new disease now and then, always self-diagnosed, and she'll call for an ambulance if she's so much as constipated. A sprained ankle is always broken to her, and a stomachache isn't due to all the painkillers she's self-medicating with, but of course it's a hidden heart attack because she read on Google once that could be a sign. Anyways, she's lactose intolerant when it suits her. She actually had the test and it came back negative. Okay. So it's my birthday and she wants to go to a nice restaurant where we live. It's a weekend and they're, as usual, very busy. We get there and she gives the server a long lesson about her lactose intolerance and how she could die if she accidentally gets some with her food. The server takes our orders. Anyways, our food is taking a bit of time. They're packed and frantic. So she's calling the waiter over, asking how long we need to wait, and the server explains that in order to cook her food, they've had to clean the kitchen, completely emptying their stove up, cleaning every utensil and so on, so halting the entire service to make sure her food doesn't have any trace of lactose. We get our food and it's amazing. As we've finished, they ask if we'd like dessert, and my mother orders chocolate truffle. The waiter stares at her, saying that's chocolate and basically made of lactose. My dear mother says, well, it's okay to cheat for a good dessert. The look on that poor waiter's face was a mix between wanting to smack my mother and getting teary-eyed. She took the order though and came back with our desserts. I've never been more ashamed in my life. I never went back there. Your mother sounds like she'd be on any given waiter's top 10 lists for the worst customers of all time. I also kind of saw red when you said she was dictating a restaurant that she wanted to go to for your birthday. People like her are the reason that a lot of other people with actual allergies aren't taken seriously. So somebody should congratulate her for her massive footprint on diners and servers everywhere. I know she's your mum, but she sounds as annoying as all heck, and I imagine if she were mine, I would fight tooth and nail against ever taking her out to eat anywhere. Karen rams me with a shopping cart and then forces me to pay for her groceries. So this happened in 2020, and I'm still laughing at the insanity and absurdity of the situation. So, as everyone was painfully aware at the time, there was a little situation going on in the world, and we were on lockdown, with the exception of going out for essential shopping. So some backstory, my nan and I are close. She's the 5th member of our family, mum, dad, me, my brother, and my nan, and she's elderly, disabled, and asthmatic, so she's high risk and vulnerable. Now, I'm also severely asthmatic and probably shouldn't be going out shopping, but for my nan, I'm willing to risk it. So I go out to do her shopping at Morrison's. She gives me her shopping list and I get what she needs and what's available. As a funny aside, the toilet roll aisle is fully stocked and I'm shocked at that. I don't get why people are so obsessed with toilet rolls, but if that's what people panic buy in this situation, at least future history lessons and exams will have ridiculous questions, and my grandkids in the future can ask about it and I can have a laugh. So anyway, on to the story. Like at most stores, there's markings to help with social distancing and to keep people safe. This entitled shopper started off by ramming me with a trolley while I was waiting to scan my items and pay, and was invading my personal space. Very rude. So I began placing my items on the till and she was just glaring at me for some reason and muttering to herself about me hurrying up. I place the divider and go to start bagging my items. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I had to rush for you, madam. So as I'm bagging my items and about to pay, the cashier continues scanning strange items that I know I wasn't buying. I ask the cashier, "What's going on? Those aren't mine." And the cashier is confused, saying there's no divider. I look up and this entitled B-word has removed the divider and now her items were being scanned and added to my bill. I tell the cashier and she starts to remove the items and sort the mistake. This is when the entitled shopper goes insane. "Excuse me, what are you doing?" I'm confused and I tell her that the items are accidentally being scanned and thinking that the divider must have been buried in the shopping, and I didn't think it was a big deal as the cashier was apologetic and sorting it out. "You need to pay for my shopping." I'm just shocked and simply say, "What?" She glares at me. "My items were being scanned on your shopping, so you have to pay for them, and since you're paying for some now, you must buy my whole shopping." I give the cashier a look and I'm absolutely gobsmacked. "What makes you think I'm going to buy your shopping?" She scoffs and continues on about how a few mistakes mean I have to pay. I pay for my items and she's still stood there expectantly waiting for me to pay for her shopping. I begin to walk away and she screams for me to come back. People are now staring, so I turn and say, "Lady, I don't know you and I don't have to buy your shopping for any reason." She then screams for security and feeds them some lie about me having to pay for her shopping. The head of security calls me over to ask what's happening and I told him. She then went on, admitting she removed the divider thinking I wouldn't notice and that I'd pay for her. Thankfully, the security guard just looked at her and told her the same thing I said, that I didn't have to. As I began walking away, she was screaming at the cashier saying she didn't have any cash or cards on her to pay and was demanding her to honor some expired coupons. I left before anything else, so I don't know how it ended. So this woman thought she was entitled to her shopping and I had to pay for it as she didn't have any other way to pay for it. Honestly, how can you be so stupid to not bring any means of paying for shopping? I'm wondering if she had tried it before and whether it worked on other people. I'm not buying someone else's shopping for no good reason. This is some real crazy crap right here. I'm not sure she forgot her money, to be honest. I just think that this woman thought she was entering some kind of legally binding loophole. Like, my items went on to this other person's transaction and now they have to buy them because rules. This is the kind of person who would be very welcome on the sovereign citizen grift. I've said the right magic words and now you have to do what I say. As usual, the question has to be asked, how has this person got this far in life thinking this way? Had they only just snapped? The pandemic was a stressful time, I know. Maybe this particular outburst was this woman's alternative to getting into a brawl over toilet paper. I don't know if she was down on her luck or just kind of a jerk, but there are probably better ways to get food than this. Guy steals $400 of gas, but I got the last laugh. As a backstory, I used to work at a marina when I was in high school that sold gas and allowed people to dock for free if they wanted to. Now one day, a guy comes in on a pretty big boat. He comes in and gets a lot of gas, like $400 worth of it. He comes to the counter to pay and gives me $400 in $100 bills, and I accept them and he goes on his merry way. Fast forward a week or so, and I'm told by my boss that the bills he paid were all counterfeit bills. Unfortunately, as he paid in cash, we had no way of tracking him down. So we think that he just got away with stealing $400 worth of gas. That is, until this idiot comes back in about a month and a half, thinking he got away with stealing the gas. When he comes back in, I recognize the guy and tell my coworker to call the police right away. However, I knew this guy would just leave if I let on that I'd recognized him and we'd discovered his plot to get free gas, so I decided to pretend I don't recognize him. Luckily for me, this guy decides to dock the boat for an hour or so on our dock, and I tell him it's not a problem. Now, it is policy to get the name and phone number of customers using free dockage, as well as asking that they leave their keys in the boat so we can move the boat to a different dock if need be. He complies to all of the rules and just leaves his boat and leaves his keys with me. After about 15 minutes of waiting, the police show up on the dock and ask my boss where the guy is. My boss tells them he just left his boat, but we have his number and can get him to come back to the boat, and he then instructs me to do just that. At this point, I was angry at this guy for making me look dumb and basically lose $400, so I call and tell him, "Hey, this is Denner from the marina. It seems like there's an issue with your engine and it seems to be smoking." For those who don't know boats that well, engines are very expensive, and this one in particular was a 350 horsepower Yamaha engine, which is top of the line, so that man got back to that boat in record time. When he got back to the boat, the look on his face when he saw 2 cops waiting for him was priceless. He tried to play it off and act like he had done nothing wrong and that he didn't know why the police were there, but that was short-lived as they arrested him and told him why he was being arrested. Turns out the guy had almost $2,000 in counterfeit $100 bills on him. Was rubbing it in his face going too far? Nope, the guy put your job on the line and hung you out to dry when he paid you with counterfeit bills. It may not be legal to do it, but some employers would definitely hang your butt out to dry for that. But even that aside, this guy was not prepared for how shifty and careful you have to be to pass on counterfeit bills. This is a high-level crime that will get you a lot of attention from federal agents. They will want to know if you're manufacturing the bills yourself or if you have connections to someone else who does, and will go to great lengths to track you down. If for some reason you do this really harshly punished crime, you would ideally do one pass of town on a major spending spree with fake plates and then get the heck out of Dodge. Not come back to the same place like this guy did. Again, we don't condone this. The ultimate trucker revenge story. I heard this one from a friend of mine who's a trucker. Although I can't prove that it's true, the guy is an honest friend and hasn't made any crap up during the time that I've known him. So I figured I'd write in with it. He was sitting in a long traffic jam on the I-24 between Nashville and Chattanooga, Tennessee, after drinking a lot of caffeine and water and soda. Since the traffic was at a dead stop and he had to pee, he took a Ziploc baggie from the back of his sleeper cab and emptied his entire bladder into it. He zipped up and got back into the driver's seat. Fast forward about 20 minutes. He still hasn't made any progress, but his CB radio just starts going crazy. Anyone who has a driver's license has probably witnessed the self-entitled jerks who drive on the shoulder of the interstate in order to get in front of traffic. By doing this, they're frequently blocking the only emergency access to the wreck. These people make me so mad, as well as every trucker sitting in traffic. So he was hearing reports of 2 Mustangs riding with the tops down with a bunch of frat douches coming up the shoulder at about 50 miles per hour. And he had a brilliant idea. Remember the Ziploc bag of wee-wee? He got into the passenger seat of the truck, rolled down the window, and waited until the Mustangs were in clear view. As they reached his truck, he threw the bag of yellow out the window. It slammed into the windshield of the first Mustang, spraying his trucker piss all over the frat D-bag passengers. They then proceeded to take the next exit, hopefully to clean off all the piss that had just coated them. He got a round of cheers on the CB radio that day. Too far? Who was more of a jerk? Oh, please let this be true because it's too damn funny. Look, despite how annoying they are, I'm a big defender of, if nothing else, the rights of these people to be young and dumb and throw stupid parties, if not some of the more extreme crap that they do, like hazing. You can always call the cops on them if they're too obnoxious, but when they're doing stuff that's actually just endangering and inconveniencing hundreds of people, then by all means, unleash the bags of pee. I thought most truckers released their bladders into bottles when the need arose. Thank God that he did this into this particular receptacle, as a plastic bottle probably wouldn't have released its payload in quite as spectacular a fashion. As a funny extra, these guys might not have even realized what this liquid was until they stopped moving. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. The Chunky Chocolate Milk. Written in 2020. Our 3 children have been social distancing at home since school closed in our state in March. We have 3, Moody, who's 15 and a girl, Magellan, an 11-year-old boy, and the Dictator, who's 4. The husband and I are essential workers, and we're gone a lot, and things at home have been collapsing into a pseudo-Lord of the Flies situation. About Magellan, he's on the spectrum, and he's genuinely one of the nicest kids you'll ever meet. He's kind, compassionate, absolutely brilliant, and will find something good about every person and every situation. His ability to find joy in the small things makes me so grateful for him. He has an almost eidetic memory for maps and directions. He's been able to do it since he was about 4, and it's eerie. If he's ever been to a place even once, he can give you turn-by-turn directions along with all the street names and directions in between. He was our little GPS, hence Magellan. He is the kid bullies will fight to protect. If he ever got into a fight, he would literally say, "That was bad and I'm upset. That kid looked really nice today before he hit me." I say all of this to say that it takes a lot to tick Magellan off, but if you do, the result will be a precisely calculated revenge plot. Anyway, the husband and I keep telling Moody not to ask the boys for their snacks. She's the oldest and the boys adore her. This usually results in her getting whatever she asks for, through some combination of nagging, manipulation, and guilt. It isn't fair to them and we want it to stop, but with work we just aren't at home to see it all. On Friday, she asked Magellan for the chocolate milk that came in his lunch delivery. He said no, and she started her 2-day campaign of harassment, none of which we knew about until Sunday night, when she asked in front of us for the chocolate milk. Magellan looked disappointed and said, "Fine," and handed the milk to his sister. It happened so fast that we didn't even react. She slunk off to the kitchen to enjoy the spoils of her victory. Magellan did nothing once she left the room but sit on the carpet and smirk. What Moody never stopped to consider was that Magellan hates chocolate milk. He hates it so much, in fact, that he never bothered to refrigerate the carton. He instead stashed the chocolate milk in a bookshelf and let it cook for 2 days while she harassed him. The calm demeanor and the smirk on his face was him simply waiting to hear the screaming coming from the kitchen when she opened the carton and took a sip. Moody did not let him down. Within seconds, screaming erupted from the kitchen, punctuated with gross, disgusting, and "Oh my god, Magellan!" Magellan didn't move from the carpet and instead sat still and said in the quietest little voice, "Little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet eating her curds and whey," before bursting into maniacal laughter. It was glorious. He exploited her obnoxious behavior and coolly planned his vengeance. He felled the teenage monster in a way that the adults haven't even come close to. I'm damn proud of that boy. In the aftermath, Moody was a little miffed, but took it in good stride. All 5 of us wish everyone health, sanity, and hopefully some joy during this crazy time. Haha, that is some slow burn revenge. Magellan is either going to run the world or be our first actual supervillain. The 2 kids in the story are both being jerks in some ways that kids, particularly teens, are prone to do, and I don't think we can really fault them for that until we see whether they grow out of it. So all that's left to do is rate which one is the more entertaining form of jerkery to watch. I've got to say that if Moody can hone her skills of manipulation better and use them only when absolutely necessary, she may find that her special skills come in handy in work situations later in life. Take it from me, being good at wheedling the right way for an extra sick day or holiday will serve her well. Magellan, well, let's just say it's much more of a select set of planning and skills, and unless he becomes a supervillain like we've mentioned before, the perfect job for him does kind of escape me. Anyway, good kids. Am I the jerk for kicking my husband's friends out of the pool? I'm currently the sole income earner out of our household. My husband has been struggling to find a job for 16 months. I don't know what's up with that. So I've been solely paying for everything. As you know, it's summertime and the kids want to go to the beach every weekend, but I'm busy working oftentimes, and my husband won't bother to take them unless he uses my car, which is a no from me because I need it for work. Anyways, so I put money towards renovating and upgrading our old pool so the kids could use it. The thing is, once the pool was ready, my husband started inviting his friends to come over and use it for hours at a time. They'd basically taken over, preventing the kids from enjoying it. They complained about being denied the pool several times, which caused them to get upset. A few notes. 1. I paid for the pool to get renovated and upgraded. 2. He and his friends are always there using it, giving me and the kids zero chance to spend some time in it. And 3. He and his friends trash the pool every single time, dropping food and drinks, and I end up having to clean it up myself. So what I did was talk to my husband about it and telling him to limit his friend's usage of the pool. He flipped out at me saying that it's his house and water too, and I can't control what he does or who he brings. I got mad and in return told him that tomorrow the kids get the pool or else I'll ban his friends from it completely. He side-eyed me and said, "Fine, they can have the damn pool tomorrow." Well, the next day, my daughter calls me crying, saying Dad brought his friends over and refused to let her and her brother play in the pool. I was livid. I literally left work right then and went home. I saw him and his friends in the pool messing around, and I just screamed my head off, telling them to get out. My husband tried to get involved, but I told him off and had all of his friends leave. He blew up at me for acting like a lunatic and said that I was being controlling and shameless. I said I already told him to let the kids play in the pool, yet he ignored my request. He yelled at me saying that just because I paid to fix the pool doesn't mean I own it. He then went back inside and started calling his friends one by one to apologize on my behalf, since he said I was too shameless to do it myself. He then left the house and hasn't been back yet. I don't know how this fact of life got away from me lately, but the last few videos have brought back into sharp relief a very depressing fact of life. There are adults in the world who are essentially massive children, and not in the fun Nick from New Girl kind of way. Some of them have kids for crying out loud and still behave like massive babies. The sir in this story is absolutely one of these. Having his bros over, leaving the place a mess, turfing the smaller kids out at the pool, going back on his promises and then throwing a massive tantrum when he's brought to task. Does this sound like the description of a father of two? Because it also could be used to describe the narrator at age 15. And you can bet that my mum wasted no time in bringing me sharply out of my worst tendencies once they became apparent. This guy needs to grow up, and the author does not seem like she's to blame. Am I the jerk for taking 2 of my nephews on vacation with me, but not the other one? I'm 36, male, and child-free. I have 2 sisters, Lisa and Annie. Lisa has 2 boys who are 9 and 7, and Annie has one who's 8, and a 1-year-old little girl. My sisters both struggle financially a little, and I have a good job. So this year, I offered to take my nephews to vacation with me. My niece is so small that I don't feel comfortable being alone with her at all, and Annie totally gets that. I told my sisters to bring the boys to my apartment for a weekend, so I can see if they'll get along and if I'm up for taking them to the seaside with me for 14 days. The boys came, and at first, we had a great time. I ordered us pizza, we watched a movie, played soccer, and the next morning I woke them up and gave them cereal. The 8-year-old then threw the cereal on the floor and says, "I have waffles on the weekend." I told him he can't have waffles for breakfast today, but we can make them for dinner or breakfast the next day. He said he doesn't like cereal, and I told him he can then just have some toast with peanut butter or some fruit. He yelled at me for not making him waffles. That day, he also cut up my shirt because I didn't let him have cookies for lunch, and told me I suck for telling him to eat his veggies before I give them ice cream. He was a nightmare. The 7- and 9-year-olds behaved great. When my sisters came to pick them up, I told Annie what happened, and she said, "Oh, he's just high-spirited." I told her I'm not taking him on vacation. I also told Lisa I'd be glad to take her boys with me, and they were super excited. My parents and some aunts have been biting my head off for treating the kids differently and denying a boy to go to the seaside just because he misbehaved once. Am I the jerk? Well, there's misbehaving once, and then there's the crime spree that the 8-year-old in question embarked upon in his otherwise cool uncle's house. I'm sorry, but there's high-spirited, and then there's just being a little tyrant. And to be clear, as usual, this isn't the kid's fault, this is on parents for not letting him know that acting out like this isn't okay, especially when you're a guest in someone else's house. If the 7-year-old can understand, so can he, barring any learning difficulties that I'm not aware of. The fact that they said high-spirited rather than anything else would imply that they haven't been rewarding and challenging the right behaviors. Your family can call you a jerk all they want, but they're not the ones having their clothes torn up and cereal thrown around the kitchen. And maybe just 1 or 2 of these offenses might have been forgivable, but you've got to draw the line somewhere. Maybe his folks can use this as a teachable moment as to why you don't behave this way, especially when you're a guest. My niece turned into a Karen. so I publicly humiliate her. I manage a chain of restaurants, and I'm generally doing work in one or the other. Once again, I'm sitting in my favorite booth that overlooks the entire restaurant when I see a familiar face walk in. It was my niece, and she had some friends with her. It must have been one of her girls' nights out. We were rather crowded, and there was a bit of a wait on tables. I went back to eating and doing the end-of-month paperwork, and I heard my niece say rather loudly, "You will seat me now. Do you know who my uncle is? I can have you fired just like that." And Tammy, the hostess, tried telling her there were no seats, but my niece wanted nothing to do with that. She said, "My uncle practically owns this place, Mr. H. You know who that is, right?" Tammy nodded her head. "Yeah, I know who he is. I see him in here all the time." And my niece said, "Well then, you know I could have your job just like that. All I have to do is make one phone call and you are gone, missy." I was livid. My niece was using my name to get a free ride, something that I frown on. I even look down on nepotism. I got up, walked up behind her as she continued her rant of how she deserves to be seated. Tammy smiled as I spoke up. "Hello, Lissa, nice to see you." "Oh, hi, Uncle," she said sweetly. "I was just explaining how I know you and that you're my uncle." "You're using my name to get a free meal, and I don't appreciate it. These people, unlike you, work for a living, and I know your father is going to be very disappointed when I call him and tell him how you're treating these people." "But Uncle, she was being really snotty to me." "Lissa, don't you dare lie to me. Tammy was being nothing but sweet and pleasant, so don't you even dare try it." Lissa squealed out, "But Uncle…" "But nothing. I don't want you trying to be a mooch. I don't approve it, and your father sure wouldn't." I apologized to her friends and told them they'd have to vacate the restaurant now. "Tammy, you see Lissa in there? You have the right to throw her out, and I'll contact the managers of the other 2 restaurants not to seat you if they hear you drop my name, or give any free meals. Lissa, I'm so disappointed in your behavior right now. Just go." Lissa stomped off with her friends, screaming she was going to tell her daddy. "No, you won't, because your dad will side with me. I know he doesn't promote this kind of attitude, and I know he didn't raise you this way. Now go." It's been several years since then. She still doesn't talk to me. Her dad apologized for her behavior. Why, I don't know. It's not his fault. He's a good man and tells me he didn't raise her to be like that. But it's okay, he made her get a job. Working for me. Yes, I made her work as a dishwasher and said my name better not drift out of her mouth to gain favoritism with the others. I think she's still ticked off at me. But oh well, I still have the respect of my employees, and that's what counts. Late update. My niece Lissa called me today out of the blue. It was a bit awkward for her at first, but we talked. She said she was sorry and has wanted to apologize for the longest time. Just didn't know how. I told her all she had to do was call, say she was sorry, and I would have forgiven her. We caught up and she told me what she had been up to. I told her I knew already I'd been talking to her dad and mum. Just because I was upset didn't mean I didn't care. She said she knows it's no excuse for her behavior, but she was just trying to impress her friends. I told Lissa I do understand, we do stupid things. She invited me to her wedding, and I invited Lissa to dinner with her fiancé on Saturday. And yes, this time dinner really will be on me. I think the author might have at least in part averted a Karen. Then again, it might be unfair to put her behavior down to pure Karenness when it sounds more like she was just being a pure unfiltered teenage brat. So I'm not sure whether it was just her growing out of it all, or the uncle and father's duo course correction, or a little bit of each. I will say that as far as punishments go, getting a dishwasher job is probably one of the more humbling ones if you have airs and graces and like to throw your name around to get special treatment. If only we could indenture more Karens into manual labor for their infractions, we could probably clean up a lot of the awful behavior we hear about here on the channel. Just a thought. Oh, who am I kidding? Most of them would be the worst coworkers in the world and a lot more trouble than they are worth as employees. I planted over 5,000 dandelion weeds in my neighbor's garden. Here's some backstory. I have a 4-year-old Cocker Spaniel named Charlie, and he likes to poop. I let him out in front of my garden every morning for his toilet routine, same in the evening. We don't have a boundary fence on where my garden and my neighbor's start, besides a row of bushes. Saying this, Charlie hasn't ever crossed or pooped past these bushes. Now, every week I collect up said poop before it turns into a disturbing amount. I've been doing this for the past 4 years to keep my front garden looking good and not smelly. He's a Cocker Spaniel. He isn't taking colossal craps. It's also a fairly big garden, so there aren't huge piles everywhere. The dog tends to spread it out to mark his territory. You'd have to physically search for it to find it. Regards to not picking it up instantly, unlike some, when my dog needs to go, he's going to go. Usually, he has a final number 2 before bed around 11 p.m. Charlie is a trained hunting dog, not some common house pet. He comes shooting and camping with me every weekend, and regards to walks, he gets one early morning and a run on the evening. He's a very well-trained dog. One day I came home from work to find that my neighbors weren't happy that there was dog doo-doo in my front garden. I instantly went to collect up what was there. There wasn't much, and it was nowhere near the boundary of where our gardens met. Fast forward a week, my neighbor again complained about it being in my garden. However, this time, they threatened to hurt my dog if he continued to do that in my garden. This time, I wasn't so nice about it, and stated that it's my garden and my dog can do as he pleases. Now, I know dog do can be annoying, but when it's not in your garden and there's no smell, due to decent airflow and an open front garden, is it really justified to go threatening a man's dog over some number 2? Anyway, after months of this going with petty things and shade being thrown at me every day about having a dog, I decided to declare war on my neighbors. Now, I know these people pretty well. They've just moved in and we let them use our Wi-Fi for a couple of months until they got theirs sorted. I picked up a few things about them, and one was how OCD they were. They cut their back garden every week and painted the entire bottom layer of the house to match their fence. This was all the fuel I needed to exact my revenge. My first step was to start off small. I knew they liked things to match, so I painted my fence gate bright pink instead of matching it with my fence. This was my first small victory. They hated it so much they begged me to correct the color. So I did. I figured if peace was an option, it was worthwhile. Then began the hate again. I had to come up with something so evil and yet genius that it couldn't be traced back to me. This is when I planted over 5,000 dandelion seeds in their front and back gardens. I figured I was in this for the long game. I did this under the cover of night and made sure to plant them in places not easily mowed. Fast forward 3 months and their garden was covered in weeds. They grew through all the slabbing and were patched all over the garden. It took them 3 days to clear the weeds and about $100 of weed killer. Long story short, jerk neighbor threatens to hurt my dogs. I plant 5,000 weeds in their garden. Am I the jerk? Yeah, if you threaten animals, honestly, most of the internet will agree that you had whatever punishment you got coming to you. These guys must have so little going on in their lives to get this worked up about some tiny cocker spaniel doo-doo in the adjacent yard. Also, I feel like the author kind of glosses over how they just casually planted several thousand weeds in their neighbor's yard without them noticing. That's a covert operation that got way too little detail. How long and painstaking a process was that? I know that weeds grow like weeds, and they're probably fairly easy to plant, but there's still a lot of coverage that you'll need to have gone in for maximum destruction, if nothing else. How did these not get caught in the lawnmower? This is a very involved job, and I need to know more, damn it. She put ramen in his coat pocket. My sister, 35, and her new boyfriend of 30, who'd only been dating for a month before quarantine, are at my mum's house during the pandemic. My mum is getting pretty frustrated because her youngest, me, has left the nest and she likes having the house to herself. My sister's boyfriend is gross. He doesn't wash his hands, he leaves mystery stains all over the carpets and floors, he has some kind of infection or open wound on his wrist that he doesn't cover or clean, he doesn't shower, and he doesn't clear his plates before putting them in the sink with no garbage disposal. With all of his hygiene issues, he'll still do things like reach into a new bag of bread that my mum bought without washing his hands, having the open wound, and he'd just gotten back from the hospital for the 3rd time in 2 days because of his wound. My mum's about to lose her mind being there with them. Going back to the dishes thing though, he doesn't clear his dishes and she's told them several times to clear off your plates or do your own dishes. He doesn't do either. After a week of those soggy noodles sitting in a bowl in the sink, my mum had had enough. His coat was sitting on the chair in the kitchen, so she took the ramen out of the bowl and stuck it in his coat pocket. Then she washed all of the dishes in the sink. He grabbed his coat a bit later to leave and go to a friend's house, probably to smoke weed with a bunch of friends during the pandemic, and she smiled and waved him out the door. Crikey, what happened with this guy? Did his actual mum get sick of looking after him and kick him out? That or his college dorm? Look, pal, I understand that we're a juvenilized generation, but 30 is taking the whole man-child who can't cook or clean act just a little bit too far. And what is your sister doing with this green herb medicating set of open, unwashed sores? Does this guy have the biggest eggplant in the world? Because it doesn't sound like he's got much going for him in the way of work. Look, this is a whole lot of judgment coming from me, and we don't know what's going on in this man's life to make him like that, but my dude, you have to at least make an effort if you don't want to get kicked out of yet another place. I say yet another because I'm nearly certain this won't be the first or even the second place he's got the boot from. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Refund my worn-out underwear or I'll sue you. A few years ago, I was the manager at a store for a company that specialized in as seen on TV products. As you can imagine, it was a pretty fun job. I was allowed, even encouraged, to try out all the products so we could promote them better. The downside, however, was some of the interesting customers that wanted refunds for the weirdest things. One rather slow day, I'd just finished restocking the shelves when a customer came storming into the store. The look on his face was comparable to the grumpy cat, if it was human. I greeted him. "Anything I can give you a hand with, sir?" "These are defective. I want a refund." He put a plastic bag down on the desk and took out a very ratty-looking pair of Tommy Copper boxer briefs. For a bit of context, the company return policy was basically exchange or store credit with a few refund exceptions based on manufacturer's guarantees. Any clothing items were strictly final sale due to hygienic reasons, but we would occasionally allow exchanges for defects within a certain time period. The policy was always printed out on the receipt, and we had an official 8x10 copy from head office with the heading Return Policy set up in plain sight next to the register. So, to humor him, I said, "Can I see your receipt?" He handed it to me, still scowling. I looked at the purchase date and saw that the purchase had been a bit over 5 months ago. It was also stamped Final Sale in red ink. "Sorry, boss, it looks like this was purchased over 5 months ago." Not only that, this item is final sale as it says right here. I grabbed a highlighter and traced over the bold Final Sale stamp. "No, that's bullcrap. This is your product, so this is your responsibility." "I'm afraid not, boss. Unfortunately, we're not the manufacturer, just the retailer. And I'm afraid this isn't a defect, it's wear and tear." "Get me your manager." I pointed to the name tag on my lanyard. "I am the manager, sir, and I'm sorry, but that's our company policy." "Bullcrap. I could sue you for this. If there was such a policy, it has to be legally in writing for customers to see." I was losing my patience at this point. "It is, sir. Here." I highlighted it on his receipt again, and here, pointing to the aforementioned sign in front of his face. I watched his face get red as he looked from his receipt to the sign and back. "Well, you'll be hearing from my lawyer." He grabbed his item and receipt, turned on his heel, and stormed out. "Okay now, take care. Have a great day." I watched his head sink into his shoulders as he stomped out the door. I enjoyed it immensely. Does that make me a jerk? And we never heard from him again, is what I wanted to read the author say next, but you never can tell with some of these people. There is, however, one detail here that's driving me a bit nuts. These undies of Tommy Copper fame are that worn down after 5 months? I don't know the brand and their respective quality, but either these are the worst undies of all time, or this gentleman was wearing them night and day for the entire period, while doing high-friction activities like cycling, back-to-back marathons, and occasionally taking them for a swim in a chlorinated pool to wash them out. As a man who's been known to wear down the occasional pair of Dacks, let me tell you that it takes at least a year of normal wear and tear in most cases to get to the stage where you can see the elastic. I don't think this gentleman got his refund. Am I the jerk for showing my missing eye to the new teacher after he told me my bangs were disrespectful? I had an accident when I was a baby, and I lost my left eye. I don't have an eye socket I could put a fake eye in, it's just normal skin and some scars on a big patch of my face. They reconstructed my face with a later surgery this way. The right side and the bottom half of my face is completely normal. I have big side bangs that hide the left side of my face so I don't freak anyone out, and I don't get weird looks. I've been going to the same school since I was 5, so the teachers and the kids know about it. We got a new teacher this week. He started by asking us to go around and introduce ourselves. When it got to me, he was rude and asked me, "Do your parents know you come to school looking like this? It's extremely disrespectful. Fix your bangs. I want to see your face." So I obeyed and tucked my bangs behind my ear, showing the left side of my face. He gasped, his face turned red, my classmates laughed, and he told me that I could let my bangs down. Later that day, my head teacher came to scold me. She told me I was wrong to shock the new teacher and I should have just told him about it. Did I do anything wrong? I just obeyed his orders. It's not my fault he ended up not wanting to look at my face. Am I the jerk? Update: my mum went in to talk to the head teacher. It turned out that the new teacher made it sound like I was playing a prank on him, trying to deliberately shock him and make fun of him in front of the class. 3 of my classmates had to be called in to confirm my part of the story. The head teacher apologized, called it an unfortunate misunderstanding, and told us she'll clear it up with the new teacher. I don't have to worry about it. I don't believe it was just a misunderstanding. It sounds like the new teacher deliberately lied, but we can't do anything about that. Yeah, this guy brought it on himself. Even if she was doing this for the sick prank bragging rights on the replacement teacher, the way he was talking to her about her appearance was pretty unacceptable. Saying to a kid that their parents should be ashamed of the way they present themselves is, to say the least, a very strong start. Even if it was against school dress code and our protagonist wasn't doing it for their own and everyone's comfort, you can cover yourself by phrasing these things as a question. And if you still want to be an authoritative jerk, you can even say, "Is there a reason your hair is covering your face?" You can still covet your small amount of power as well as getting a verbal reason why, rather than a shock and losing your precious authority. Here's hoping he doesn't target our author going forward. Am I the jerk for not saying anything when someone called me spoiled and privileged? My husband's best friend, Nate, got a new girlfriend, Camilla, about half a year ago. She moved to our city recently, so she doesn't really have any friends here, but she and I hung out a couple of times and started to get friendly. For context, we're all in our 20s, my husband and I both have nice jobs, we own a small flat and play tennis as a hobby. Camilla thinks it's a rich people sport. And we regularly travel by finding €10 plane tickets and staying at cheap hostels for 3 nights at a time. Now, to the point, my husband and I were hosting a little get-together. Nate, Camilla, and a few of our other friends were invited. At one point, the conversation went to topics like the current level of inflation, how the lockdown affected people, and jobs, the housing market, among other things. And I had something to say too, agreeing with Camilla. Camilla cut me off and said something like, "Well, no offense, but you're way too much of a spoiled, privileged girl to understand things like this. You'd need a tragedy or two in your life to understand struggle. I love you, but you've never experienced any hardship in your life." The room went silent and nobody said anything. After some awkward silence, I stood up and said, "Well, is anyone hungry? Shall we eat?" And we never went back to that topic. Camilla messaged me the next day asking me how I could do this to her. Nate told her afterwards that I was raised by a very hostile father and that I fell ill as a teenager, spending months in hospital and had to have multiple life-saving surgeries, and it took me a month to learn how to walk again. Camilla is mad at me for not telling these very personal things to her before and making her look terrible to Nate's friends. She said that even correcting her at the party would have been better because then she could have apologized to me in front of everyone. But I took that chance away from her and now she'll never make friends. Honestly, this whole thing is ridiculous and I don't really think I'm the jerk, but it never hurts to ask. Maybe I should have gently corrected her after she said that. Am I the jerk? Nope, me thinks she would have looked like just as much of a jerk, if not more, if you'd called her out on all these things and undercut her in the argument. Here's an idea, Camilla. How about we just don't assume these things about people and insult them to their faces in public settings? I imagine among all my friends, there are probably quite a few stories that they would rather keep to themselves or their therapists. And if they ever choose to share with me, great. If not, in the words of Roy Kent, that's none of my frickin' business. The fact that she thinks this has blown all of her chances of ever making friends speaks volumes of her social skills. It's easy to meet people. If your spouse's friends were your only shot at making people hang around you, what are you doing wrong that no one else wants to?
When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.